Chapter 1962. Shangguan Qiu held the Juku yellow dragon pill and looked at it over and over again. Her eyes were full of surprise. It had 5 elixir veins. Most importantly, she had never seen this medicinal pill before. Fire Lotus frowned and asked secretly, "Qin Dage, is this appropriate?" "I've thought about it. Even if I successfully enter the Ninth Heaven Palace, the soul stones I get are far from enough, so I have to think of another way. Pills like the potential elixir are undoubtedly the fastest shortcut. Compared to the potential elixir, the Juku yellow dragon pill is slightly inferior, so it shouldn't cause too much trouble. Of course, there's another reason why I'm doing this," Qin Feiyang explained. "What is it?" Fire Lotus was puzzled. "The demon ancestor, Dong Zhenyang, Mu Tianyang, and Mu Qing entered the ancient world before us. I wonder where they are now. So I want to use the Juku yellow dragon pill to lure them out. Similarly, I'm using the name Jiang Haoyan to lure them out, because they all know that I've used this name before." Qin Feiyang thought. "I see." Fire Lotus was enlightened. Shangguan Qiu thought for a long time, but couldn't figure out what kind of pill it was. So she looked up at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Young master, what is this pill called? What are its effects?" "The Juku yellow dragon pill can increase the cultivation of battle kings and battle emperors. The more elixir veins there are, the higher the cultivation level. For example, the Juku yellow dragon pill in your hand has 5 elixir veins, so it can increase the cultivation level by 4 levels at once," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "What?" Shangguan Qiu was stunned and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. She asked, "Young master, you're not fooling me, are you?" Qin Feiyang frowned and said unhappily, "Miss, you're being too serious. I wouldn't dare to talk nonsense in the treasure pavilion." "Young master, don't be angry. I was also too shocked. That's why I had my suspicions. That's because I've never heard of such a medicinal pill before," Shangguan Qiu hurriedly explained. Qin Feiyang said, "In that case, miss, you can try it out first." "All right. I'll arrange it right away. If what young master said is true, I will personally go and talk to young master," Shangguan Qiu said. "Then I'll wait for the good news. However, only you and I know about this." Qin Feiyang smiled. "I understand." Shangguan Qiu nodded. Qin Feiyang smiled and quickly left with Fire Lotus. Sitting alone in the private room, Shangguan Qiu looked at the 9 tunes yellow dragon pill in disbelief. If this pill was really able to improve the cultivation of battle emperor and battle emperor, it would be extremely valuable. Wait a minute. A moment later, Shangguan Qiu suddenly thought of something. He quickly got up and ran outside. However, he did not see Qin Feiyang after he ran out of the treasure hall. What a fool! I didn't establish a contract with him. She stood at the entrance of the treasure hall and slapped her forehead angrily. "Steward, what's wrong with you?" The guards at the door looked at her in confusion. "Nothing." Shangguan Qiu waved his hand and turned to enter the treasure hall. However, he suddenly stepped back and looked at the 2 guards. "In the future, if Jiang Haoyan comes to the treasure hall, you must treat him well and inform me immediately." "Jiang Haoyan?" The 2 guards were confused. Shangguan Qiu said, "The one who cheated Feng Zijuan a few days ago." "Got it." The 2 guards nodded. Shangguan Qiu also left in a hurry. The Black Tortoise World. Qin Feiyang stood against the wind and looked at the image in the void with a smile on his face. At the side, Huolian had a face full of suspicion. After leaving the treasure hall, they found a dark alley and entered the Black Tortoise World. Then, they returned to the treasure hall. Therefore, they both saw Shangguan Qiu chasing after them. Fire Lotus looked away and asked in confusion, "Qin Dage, why didn't you establish a contract with her?" "Girl, this is the trick." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Trick?" Fire Lotus was stunned. "That's right. There's a saying that goes, 'What you don't get is the most precious.' What you get too easily will not be cherished. In short, when dealing with a shrewd person like Shangguan, you must seize the initiative. Qin Feiyong smiled. I see. Fire Lotus smiled in realization. You're waiting for her to come to you. Correct. Qin Feiyong nodded. Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyong and sighed. Qin Dage, I feel more and more that you're too scary. Scary? How so? Is there anyone kinder than me in this world? Qin Feiyong laughed and controlled the Black Tortoise realm, silently flying out of the city. How narcissistic. Fire Lotus shook her head, but there was a trace of a smile on her face. Although this man's actions were unpredictable, it was undeniable that he was really good to the people around him. Take her, for example. If it was someone else who was not related to her, would he be so kind to help her? Obviously not. Therefore, in comparison, this man was really outstanding. Just as Fire Lotus's imagination was running wild, Qin Feiyong controlled the Black Tortoise realm and took out the image crystal. Buzz! A fiery red shadow appeared. When Hua Yi saw Qin Feiyong, he teased, Brother Jiang, you're in the limelight at the Treasure Pavilion again today. Qin Feiyong smiled bitterly and asked, Are you still at the Jade Zither Pavilion? Yes. I've been waiting for you to come here for a drink, but you didn't come. I'm a little sad. Hua Yi said with a look of dissatisfaction. Let's talk about it after drinking. The Black Dragon Lake you mentioned last time. Where is it in the Sky Dragon mountain range? Can you give me the coordinates? Qin Feiyong said. Hua Yi was stunned and asked suspiciously, You're going to the Black Dragon Lake now? Let's go and take a look. Qin Feiyong smiled. You. Hua Yi shook his head and straightforwardly gave the coordinates to Qin Feiyong. Thanks. Qin Feiyong thanked him and was about to turn off the image crystal. Wait, is there any movement from Feng Yuan and Guiyong recently? Hua Yi asked. Nope. Qin Feiyong shook his head. Hua Yi frowned and said, I haven't seen any suspicious people in the past few days. What are they thinking? I don't believe that they will give up. They're not so kind people. This is just the calm before the storm, Qin Feiyong said. Then you have to be careful, Hua Yi warned. You too. Qin Feiyong smiled and turned off the image crystal. While they were talking, the Black Tortoise world had already left Sky Dragon City and entered the mountains. Qin Feiyong saw that there was no one around and took Fire Lotus and left the Black Tortoise world. He opened an altar and jumped up. Swish! Soon, the two of them arrived above a lake. The lake was dozens of miles in size and surrounded by steep mountains. The aura of berserk beasts was countless. However, the two of them didn't sense any berserk beast aura in the lake below. The lake was as clear as a mirror. The night breeze blew past, causing ripples to form on the surface of the lake. Qin Dage, although I didn't sense any berserk beast aura in the lake, I have a feeling that there's a pair of eyes watching us, Fire Lotus said in a deep voice. Is that so? Qin Feiyong was surprised. Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Feiyong scanned the surface of the lake. His dark eyes flickered with wisps of light. If Fire Lotus's feeling was right, then it was very likely to be the Black Dragon. In other words, there was no need to hide now. Boom! With that thought, his divine sense emerged from the top of his head and rushed towards the lake. Splash! However, before Qin Feiyong's divine sense entered the lake, a huge wave suddenly appeared in the middle of the lake. Following closely, a terrifying dragon aura rushed into the sky like a volcanic eruption. This is the aura of a half-step divine lord. Qin Feiyong's eyes trembled. What Hua Yi said was true. This black dragon had the cultivation of a half-step divine lord. Roar! Accompanied by a loud dragon roar, a black dragon rushed out of the water and stopped in front of Qin Feiyong and Fire Lotus. It's really a black dragon. Qin Feiyong's eyes lit up The black dragon in front of him was more than 10,000 feet long. Its scales were dense, like a majestic mountain range. Its eyes were as big as a dustpan, flashing with an astonishing, ominous light. The black dragon stared at Qin Feiyang and shouted, "Human, what are you looking for by releasing your divine sense?" The voice was like a bell, shaking Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. "I'm looking for you." Qin Feiyang laughed. The ominous light in the black dragon's eyes became stronger and stronger. "What are you looking for this emperor for? Do you want this emperor to be your mount? Or do you want this emperor's blood essence?" "Don't misunderstand." Qin Feiyang quickly waved his hand and said, "I'm here to confirm something with you." "Confirm something?" The black dragon was stunned. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the flame god power emerged, condensing into a figure. This person was Hua-Yi. Fire Lotus was puzzled. "Qin Dage, what do you mean by this?" "Hua-Yi has the black dragon's blood, which means he fought with the black dragon." "But you also saw that Hua-Yi is only a war god at the Great Success stage, and the black dragon is a half-step divine lord. A war god at the Great Success stage can actually obtain dragon blood from a half-step divine lord black dragon. Don't you think it's strange?" Qin Feiyang thought. Fire Lotus was stunned. "So this is your purpose in coming to the Black Dragon Lake?" "Yes. The feeling Hua-Yi gives me is too special. It's familiar yet strange. So I want to understand his true strength." Qin Feiyang transmitted. Just as he finished speaking, Qin Feiyang noticed that the black dragon looked at Hua-Yi's figure with eyes full of fear and anger. Qin Feiyang said, "I want to know his strength." "You know him?" The black dragon didn't answer. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. The black dragon asked again, "Then what is your relationship with him?" "We can be considered friends." Qin Feiyang thought for a moment and said, "Friends," the black dragon murmured. Suddenly, his ferocious nature erupted. He raised his giant tail high and smashed it towards Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus like lightning. Qin Feiyang's expression changed. He quickly pushed Fire Lotus away with a palm and punched out. The power of the divine dragon surged out. Bang! Kacha! The giant tail and the fist collided. A world-destroying aura swept out in all directions like a tide. The surrounding mountains collapsed and the void shattered. Puff! At the same time, Qin Feiyang spat out a mouthful of blood. The skin on his arm was lacerated. His entire body was like a meteor as he smashed into the lake below. Chapter 1963. Qin Dage. Fire Lotus's expression changed as she looked down and shouted, "You greedy, stupid, despicable humans. Don't even think about escaping today." The black dragon roared angrily as it raised its tail again and charged towards Fire Lotus. "You dare to hurt Qin Dage, you're courting death." Fire Lotus's hair fluttered in the wind. Her eyes were cold and her body emitted a murderous aura. Shwa! She took a step back and the power of the dead surged out like a tide towards the black dragon. What kind of divine power is this? The black dragon's pupils contracted. This divine power was actually able to ignore the defenses of the physical body and head straight for its sea of consciousness. "I want you to die." Fire Lotus shouted coldly, "You." A trace of disdain appeared in the black dragon's eyes as it roared and attacked the power of the dead. The power of the dead was immediately shattered. Fire Lotus's body trembled as she spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. After all, the black dragon was too strong, and Fire Lotus was only an early-stage war god. No matter how strong her power of the dead was, it was impossible for her to hurt the black dragon. "Ant who will die?" The black dragon's eyes were filled with murderous intent as its tail roared through the air and charged towards Fire Lotus. "You dare to hurt her!" But at this moment, a furious roar exploded in the lake. following closely. A murderous aura rushed out of the lake, like a volcano erupting. What? The black dragon looked at the lake in shock. It thought that this human had already died at the bottom of the lake, but it didn't expect him to still be alive. Voila! A huge wave rose up. Qin Feiyang held a blood-red sword as he charged out of the huge wave. His body was filled with murderous intent as he slashed towards the giant tail. What kind of divine weapon is this? The murderous aura is so terrifying. The black dragon's pupils contracted as divine power surged from its giant tail. With a deafening sound of wind and thunder, it charged towards Qin Feiyang. Humph! Qin Feiyang snorted coldly and didn't dodge. Clang! The blood-red sword struck the giant tail, and sparks flew everywhere. The next moment, the dragon scales on the giant tail were shattered into pieces. Immediately after, with a painful cry, the dragon's tail was cut off on the spot. Voila! Dragon blood poured out like a waterfall and dyed the void red. How is this possible? The black dragon fled into the distance and stared in shock at the blood-colored sword in Qin Feiyang's hand. Fire Lotus flew to Qin Feiyang's side and asked with concern, "Qin Dage, are you all right?" "I'm fine. Why are you so impulsive?" Qin Feiyang looked at her with dissatisfaction. "I'm just angry. We're not here to take its divine soul. Why would it want to kill us?" Fire Lotus said unhappily, "What? You want to take this emperor's divine soul?" Black Dragon angrily said, "I did have that thought. However, every mystical dragon is extremely rare. I really can't bear to see them like this. But now I've changed my mind. Today, I must take your divine soul. Because you've provoked me." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with blood-red light. The black dragon god panicked and said angrily, "If you have the ability, put down the divine artifact in your hand." "Divine artifact?" Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and said jokingly, "If you have the ability, why don't you suppress your cultivation to the level of an early-stage war god?" "Okay." The black dragon agreed without hesitation, and its cultivation rapidly plummeted. However, in the blink of an eye, it stabilized at the level of an early-stage war god. Aya! Qin Feiyang was surprised. He actually did that. Wasn't this guy a little too confident? Qin Feiyang also waved his hand, and the blood-red sword dissipated. Dissipated? Is it not a divine artifact? The black dragon's eyes widened. Qin Feiyang swallowed a healing pill and snorted, "Stop talking nonsense, let's fight!" Swish! He took a step forward with an imposing aura. Wait! The black dragon's eyes widened again. It finally noticed the purple golden dragon blood on Qin Feiyang's body. How could a human have dragon blood? What the hell? However, Qin Feiyang ignored it and slapped the black dragon's body. Roar! The black dragon let out a cry, and its huge body was sent flying into the mountains outside the lake. Boom! The giant mountains crumbled immediately. The earth also sank, and a deafening rumble sounded like thunder. "Bastard, I'm talking to you. Didn't you hear me?" The black dragon got up and rushed into the sky and roared angrily. "I told you, stop talking nonsense." Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. "Okay, if you want to die, I'll grant you your wish." The black dragon was furious. Its divine power turned into a giant wave that covered the sky and pounced towards Qin Feiyang. The corners of Qin Feiyang's lips curled up, and the divine dragon force formed by the purple-gold dragon Qi surged out in all directions. Boom! The black dragon's divine power was instantly annihilated. What? The purple-golden dragon energy? The black dragon was dumbfounded again. Who was this person? Not only did he have the purple-golden dragon blood, but he also had the true purple-golden dragon energy. Could it be that he was not a human, but a purple-golden dragon? Just as the black dragon was stunned the purple golden dragon energy roared out and drowned it. Ah! A scream suddenly resounded through the night sky. The dragon scales on the black dragon's body cracked and shattered one by one. In the blink of an eye, the black dragon's entire body was badly mutilated. Boom! But suddenly, the black dragon's aura was fully released. Its cultivation instantly soared to a half-step divine lord. Then, that huge body directly crushed over. The power of the purple-gold divine dragon immediately crumbled and ceased to exist. At the same time, a wisp of divine power flashed across the sky like lightning and swept towards Qin Feiyang's lower abdomen. It was a critical moment. Qin Feiyang's body tilted, and that wisp of divine power immediately swept past his waist and tore a large piece of flesh. However, his lower abdomen and qi had escaped. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and looked at the wound on his waist, then raised his head and glared at the black dragon angrily. "Do you want to say that I'm despicable?" "You're more despicable than me." The black dragon sneered. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. The black dragon said the dignified purple golden dragon actually pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger, pretending to be a lowly human. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Did this black dragon think that his real body was the purple golden dragon? The purple golden dragon blood, the purple golden dragon energy. Aren't these the best proof you still don't admit it? The black dragon said angrily. Fine. As you said, I'm the purple golden dragon. Qin Feiyang grinned and teleported in front of the black dragon. Bastard, you still won't stop. The black dragon roared and spat out a mouthful of dragon breath, pouncing towards Qin Feiyang with an earth-shattering force. Give me a taste of my own medicine. Qin Feiyang slapped out with his palm, golden light surging from his palm. Boom! After a short stalemate, the dragon breath turned in the air and instantly drowned the black dragon. At that moment, the black dragon screamed. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. When the dragon breath dissipated, the black dragon was already on the verge of death. Qin Feiyang walked in front of the black dragon and said indifferently, "Half-step divine lord is only SOO. What the hell is going on?" The black dragon looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. "Half-step divine lord, although you haven't truly reached the divine lord realm, you're already not comparable to a war god. Normally speaking, with my cultivation, no matter how powerful the divine arts I have mastered, it's impossible for me to pose a threat to you. It's even more impossible for me to seriously injure you. But unfortunately, the divine arts I have mastered can ignore the barrier of the major realm." Qin Feiyang sneered. Ignore the barrier of the major realm. Hearing this, the black dragon's heart was in turmoil. There is actually such a divine art in the world. Are you convinced? Qin Feiyang asked. No, this emperor hasn't activated his battle soul yet. If you have the ability, wait for this emperor to recover from his injuries and fight again. The black dragon said angrily. Qin Feiyang said, for a defeated opponent, I don't want to waste any more time. The black dragon was stunned for a moment, then immediately burned with anger and roared. Bastard, is there a need to humiliate this emperor like this? This is the truth. How can it be called humiliation? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. The black dragon was so angry that he was about to go crazy. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, This emperor's skills are inferior, I admit defeat. If you want to kill me, then come. You have quite a backbone. Qin Feiyang chuckled. Humph! The black dragon snorted from his nose, closed his eyes, and quietly waited for death. But after waiting for a while, he didn't hear Qin Feiyang's movements. So he opened his eyes suspiciously. When he saw Qin Feiyang at this time, he was stunned. At this moment, Qin Feiyang was crossing his arms in front of his chest, and he had no intention of killing him. Didn't you want to take this emperor's divine soul? Why don't you do it? The black dragon raised his eyebrows. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, I changed my mind again, can I? You really change your mind. Then tell me, what do you want to do? The black dragon asked. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and Hui Yi's shadow appeared again. The black dragon's eyes surged with anger. Qin Feiyang said, his strength, how is it? The black dragon frowned and said, aren't you his friend? You still don't know. I ask, you answer. If you dare to say another word of nonsense, then I will really take your divine soul. Qin Feiyang said. The black dragon's pupils shrank and said, this person's cultivation is the same as yours, a low-level war god. But his methods are very terrifying, not inferior to yours. Not inferior to me? Qin Feiyang frowned. Yes. Half a month ago, he accidentally came here and discovered this emperor's existence. At that time, seeing that he was only a low-level war god, this emperor didn't take him seriously. But after fighting with him, this emperor found out that he was a bastard who pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. The black dragon gritted his teeth and said, what did he do to you to make you hate him so much? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Although he didn't kill this emperor, he plundered this emperor's treasures. Those treasures were all painstakingly accumulated by this emperor. He didn't even leave a copper coin for this emperor. Don't you think he's too much? The black dragon roared angrily. Ah, Qin Feiyang was stunned. So it was for the treasures. Fire Lotus walked over, looked at the black dragon, and asked, then do you know his identity? I don't know. If I knew, this emperor would have already dug up the graves of his 19 generations of ancestors. The black dragon coldly snorted. Fire Lotus couldn't help but bitterly smile. How much did he hate Hua Yi to say such ruthless words? The black dragon said, in short, if you're not familiar with him, then you have to be careful of him. Qin Feiyang thoughtfully thought for a while and said with a smile, thank you for the reminder. There's one more question. Where can I find the Reaper's fruit and ghost wood in this heavenly dragon mountain range? Reaper's fruit? Ghost wood. The black dragon was slightly stunned, looked around, and said in a low voice, heavenly dragon mountain range doesn't have it, but there's definitely a place that has it. Where? Qin Feiyang hurriedly asked. Chapter 1964. The black dragon looked at Qin Feiyang with disdain. Even if I tell you, you might not dare to enter this place. Qin Feiyang was taken aback. He asked suspiciously, is that so? Of course. This place is Nine Heaven Palace. The black dragon said. Nine Heaven Palace? Qin Feiyang was surprised. That's right. There's a cemetery in Nine Heaven Palace. Inside the cemetery are buried the dead of Nine Heaven Palace. There's 100% death god fruit and een soulwood. However, the cemetery is the biggest forbidden area of Nine Heaven Palace. Not only are there super experts guarding it, but there's also an indestructible barrier. Apart from the palace masters, no one can enter the cemetery. The black dragon said. Nine Heaven Palace. Cemetery. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and frowned. How do you know so much? Many disciples of Nine Heaven Palace come here to train every day, so it's not hard to know the situation of Nine Heaven Palace. So it's like that. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. He lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Then he turned to look at the Fire Lotus and said with a smile, let's go. Okay. Fire Lotus nodded. Wait. The black dragon was stunned. You really won't kill this emperor. Why? Do you want to die? Qin Feiyang turned his head and looked at the black dragon playfully. No, no, no. This emperor is just surprised. The black dragon hurriedly waved its claws. Qin Feiyang smiled and took out an altar. Wait a while. This emperor wants to ask, where is the purple gold divine dragon clan's land? How many clansmen do you have? The black dragon hurriedly asked. You really think I'm a purple gold divine dragon? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Reviving the altar, he said without turning his head, Don't tell anyone about what happened today, especially the purple gold divine dragon blood and purple gold divine dragon force. Understood, understood. Your purple gold divine dragon clan must be plotting something. Black Dragon chuckled. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead, jumped onto the teleportation altar with the fire lotus, and soon disappeared without a trace. I had originally thought that the purple gold divine dragon was only a legend. Never would I have imagined that the purple gold divine dragon actually existed in this world. It seems that there is hope for us dragons to rise again. The black dragon chuckled and entered the lake, disappearing without a trace. Just as Qin Feiyang and the black dragon disappeared, a young man in fiery clothes walked out of the forest in the distance. That was right. This person was Hui. Purple gold dragon blood, the power of the purple gold divine dragon, Qin Dage, surname Qin. Is there such a coincidence in this world? It seems like my guess is right. This matter is getting more and more interesting, Hui whispered to himself. A meaningful smile appeared in his eyes. Then he opened an altar and vanished from sight. Early the next morning, inside the castle, Qin Feiyang's image crystal vibrated. Qin Feiyang awoke from his cultivation and took out the image crystal. Two illusory figures appeared. They were Gongzi Feng and Gao Xiaolong. Qin Feiyang was stunned for a moment. Then he teased, Your relationship is developing very quickly. Feng Zijuan smiled. In the past, it was the Dragon King's temple. We didn't recognize each other. Gao Xiaolong was also full of smiles. Moreover, when he looked at Qin Feiyang, his eyes were filled with gratitude. If it weren't for Qin Feiyang pulling the strings, a small character like him wouldn't be able to walk together with someone like Gongzi Feng. Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, Is there something you need from me? Gongzi Feng said, The higher-ups have decided to officially start the disciple recruitment tomorrow. Tomorrow, Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. The registration location will be set at the central square of Sky Dragon City. There are 3 days to register. The official test will be held on the 4th day. Gongzi Feng said. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, What is the content of the test? The content of the test will only be announced on the day of the official test. This is to prevent people from cheating. However, don't worry. We will think of a way to find out in advance. Gongzi Feng said. Can you do it? Qin Feiyang had a doubtful attitude. Gao Xiaolong smiled. Big brother Jiang, I definitely can't do it. However, senior brother Jun can definitely do it. Why do you say that? Qin Feiyang was curious. Because the chief examiner of this test is senior brother Jun's father. Gao Xiaolong said. I see. Qin Feiyang came to a realization and smiled. Gao Xiaolong, you should leave first. I have something to discuss with Gongzi Feng in private. Gao Xiaolong was stunned. What was it that Gongzi Feng couldn't let him know? However, he was also a tactful person. He didn't ask much and turned to leave. Gongzi Feng looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and said, Big brother Jiang, what are you trying to say? Qin Feiyang asked, Does Gao Xiaolong know about your matter? Yes. Gongzi Feng nodded. How did he know? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Gongzi Feng said helplessly, Isn't it because of you, big brother Jiang? Me. Qin Feiyang was stunned. I heard from Gao Xiaolong that his sister Gao Shaohui has been with you. Gao Shaohui was the one who told him about this matter. Gongzi Feng said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed that after saving Gao Xiaolong, he did indeed talk to Fire Lotus about Gongzi Feng being an illegitimate child in front of Gao Shaohui. It's my fault. Qin Feiyang smiled apologetically. It's nothing. It will be exposed sooner or later anyway. Gongzi Feng shook his head. Although the chief examiner is your father, based on your relationship with your father, are you confident that you can find out the contents of the examination from him? Qin Feiyang asked. Gongzi Feng smiled confidently and said, I'm confident about this. What I mean is that there are some things that you should try not to do personally. Let Gao Xiaolong do it. After all, he is different from you. Even if he makes some mistakes, it won't bring about a fatal disaster. Qin Feiyang said. Gongzi Feng was touched and cupped his hands. Thank you for your concern, big brother Jiang. I will be careful. All right then. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. He put away the image crystal and lowered his head, deep in thought. Fire Lotus glanced at the mermaid princess and the others, then looked at Qin Feiyang and whispered, Qin Dage, I'm afraid this matter is not simple. The mermaid princess and the others were cultivating, so she did not want to disturb them. I think so too. Nine Heavens Palace has as many experts as the clouds. Why did they let Gongzi Feng's father be the chief examiner? Looks like the examination won't go smoothly. Qin Feiyang muttered. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Outside. On the same day, the news of Nine Heavens Palace's disciple recruitment spread quickly in Sky Dragon City. The northern region was very big and many big things happened every day. But compared to the Nine Heavens Palace's disciple recruitment, other so-called big things were insignificant. In the evening, in the entire northern region, whether it was big or small towns or remote villages, almost all received the news. Without any suspense, many people rushed to Sky Dragon City at the first moment. As batch after batch of people poured into the city, the originally bustling Sky Dragon City became even livelier. On the morning of the second day, Sky Dragon City's big and small restaurants were packed with people. Even if they had money, they couldn't find a place to stay. Therefore, the people who came later all gathered outside the city, because there was no more space in the city. On the third day, the plains outside the city were filled with people. Do you know who this year's chief examiner is? Do you know what the examination is about? Every year it is only announced on the day of the examination. Who knows? But what is certain is that many people will die today. Yeah. Although Nine Heavens Palace is a cultivation, holy land, the contents of the examination over the years are too cruel. Without the blessing of the goddess of victory, it is impossible to become a disciple of Nine Heavens Palace. If that is the case, then why did you come here? To join in the fun and broaden my horizons. Everyone gathered in twos and threes and discussed. Central Plaza. It was located at the center of Sky Dragon City, not far from the Treasure Pavilion and Jade Zither Pavilion. This place was more crowded than the other places. In the center of the plaza stood a dozen tall and sturdy men. They all looked middle-aged and wore black clothes. Each of them was more than 2 meters tall, like a small mountain, emitting a shocking pressure. The clothes on their chests were engraved with a flame pattern of a small sword. That's right. They were all members of Nine Heavens Palace's Law Enforcement Hall. The dozen of them formed a circle. On one hand, they were there to maintain order, and on the other hand, they were there to protect a white-haired old woman. The white-haired old woman sat on a chair, her old eyes bright. In front of her was a desk, and on the desk was a yin and yang ring. For every person who came forward to register, the white-haired old woman would take out a black token from the yin and yang ring and record their name and cultivation on it. Then the old woman would hand the token to the person who registered. Soon, it was the third day of registration. It was also the last day. In these 3 days, other than the people who registered, there was one person who guarded the plaza all day. This person was a middle-aged man. His cultivation was not bad. He was a peak divine warrior. For the past 3 days, he had been standing outside the square, looking around as if he was looking for someone. Time passed, and the sky gradually darkened. 5 young men and women were walking on the street, talking and laughing. There were 2 men and 3 women. Of the 2 young men, one was wearing a snow-white robe. His temperament was otherworldly. The other was wearing a flaming robe. His fiery red hair fluttered in the wind. His entire person was like a ball of fire. That's right. The 2 of them were Qin Feiyang and Hui. Of the 3 women beside them, one was wearing a mask, wearing a light yellow dress, her black hair fluttering in the wind, looking somewhat mysterious. This person was Fire Lotus, without a doubt. The other 2 women were both wearing light, golden long dresses. They were tall and slender and had a graceful bearing. Moreover, they all had a devastatingly beautiful face. But the difference was that the woman on the left had a head of wavy golden hair, like a waterfall, extremely dazzling. In front of outsiders, she was like a goddess, sacred and inviolable. However, in front of Qin Feiyang, she showed a timid side, firmly holding onto Qin Feiyang's hand, her face glowing with happiness. There was no suspense. The only person who could be so close to Qin Feiyang was naturally the mermaid princess, and the woman on the right gave off a noble aura. Her dark eyes were like black gems, crystal clear, without any impurities. With her peerless beauty and exquisite figure, no matter where she went, she would attract a lot of stunned gazes. That's right, she was Qin Rushwang. Every frown, every smile, every movement exuded endless charm. Literature Center. Chapter 1965. Hua Yi glanced at the mermaid princess and Qin Rushwang, and then at Fire Lotus. He shook his head and smiled. Brother Jiang, I really envy you. Envy me for what? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Isn't that obvious? Look at the 3 beside you. Which one of them isn't a peerless beauty? Look at the men around you. They look like pigs, and their eyes look like they can't wait to kill you. Hua Yi said. Qin Feiyang heard him and scanned the crowd around him. Sure enough, basically all the men were glaring at him fiercely, as if they hated him for stealing their wives. And along the way, there were people who came to hit on him from time to time. Actually, I'm also helpless. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Hua Yi's face twitched. He was speechless. You're helpless? Why don't you give them all to me? This guy really didn't know how lucky he was. Give them to you? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. He rolled his eyes, pointed at Qin Rushwang, and smiled playfully. Okay, I'll give them to you. Hua Yi glanced at Qin Rushwang, his eyes full of amazement. What are you looking at? Qin Rushwang raised her eyebrows. Hua Yi laughed. I'm not blind. Beautiful women, of course. I have to take a few more glances. Is that so? Then tell me, how beautiful am I? Qin Rushwang smiled charmingly, full of charm. Qin Feiyang saw this and immediately took the mermaid princess and Fire Lotus back a few steps, keeping a distance from Hua Yi. Hua Yi looked at Qin Rushwang stunned, but he didn't know that there was a cold light in Qin Rushwang's eyes. Suddenly, Qin Rushwang grabbed Hua Yi's hand and screamed with a pale face, "Molester!" Whoosh! At that moment, a large number of angry eyes were fiercely directed at Hua Yi. Hua Yi was also stunned. What kind of drama was this? Bastard! How dare you act like a hooligan on the street? You're courting death. Beat him up. Then, amidst the angry roars, Hua Yi was surrounded. Those people were truly ruthless. It was as if they had a vendetta against Hua Yi for killing their father. They were punching and kicking him. Actually, many people knew that the 2 of them knew each other because they were talking and laughing before. But in front of a beauty, they couldn't care less. Qin Rushwang retreated to the side of Qin Feiyang and the others. As she watched Hua Yi get beaten up, her face was filled with schadenfreude. The most terrifying thing in the world is indeed women. Qin Feiyang glanced at Hua Yi and looked at him with sympathy. Miss, are you satisfied? Should we continue? A moment later, The group of men whose minds had been blinded by lust turned to look at Qin Rushuang ingratiatingly. "Thank you for upholding justice for this little girl," Qin Rushuang said coquettishly. "No need, no need. Acting bravely for a just cause is what a man should do. Miss, may I get to know you? I'm Zhang San." "I'm Li Si. My name is Lu Wu." The group immediately surrounded Qin Rushuang. "What do you want?" Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and stood in front of Qin Rushuang. "Kid, who are you?" "You'd better mind your own business." At that moment, the group of people stared fiercely at Qin Feiyong. "He's my brother. Everyone be more polite." Qin Rushuang giggled. "So he's the girl's brother. I'm sorry, brother-in-law. No, I'm sorry, brother. I've offended you. Please forgive me." Everyone's expression instantly changed. They looked at Qin Feiyong with a fawning expression. Qin Feiyong couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. In fact, when he left the castle, when Qin Rushuang and the mermaid princess told him that they also wanted to sign up for the assessment, he firmly opposed it, because he was worried that such a thing would happen. Unfortunately, his opposition was useless. Not to mention the mermaid princess, just Qin Rushuang, who was at the level of a great-grandmother. He dared to be presumptuous? "Disperse. I still have to sign up. I'm not in the mood to mess around with you." Qin Feiyong glanced at those who were trying to curry favor and waved his hand helplessly. A purple-clothed youth said, "So, brother-in-law, what did you say?" Qin Feiyong glared at him. No, it was a slip of the tongue. The purple-clothed youth quickly waved his hand and changed his words. "So, brother, you also want to sign up for the assessment? How about this? I happen to be free. I'll lead the way." "No need. I know where to go." Qin Feiyong held back his temper and said. The purple-clothed youth laughed. "Don't be so polite." "That's right. We're all family. Don't be so polite." The others also followed suit. "Jiang Haoyan, your sister caused me to be like this. How are you going to compensate me for my loss?" Suddenly, Hua Yi jumped out of the crowd and roared at Qin Feiyong. "What? He's Jiang Haotian, the fierce man who cheated Feng Zijuan? I heard that now, when he opened his mouth in the auction house, the whole audience was dead silent. No one dared to compete with him." The crowd suddenly became restless. "So it's Brother Jiang. I'm sorry to disturb you." The purple-clothed youth came back to his senses, and without hesitation, he immediately turned and ran. The others also dispersed in an uproar. In their eyes, there was fear that couldn't be dispelled. Qin Feiyong looked at those people in amazement. Was his reputation now so big? "Jiang Haotian, I'm not joking. You have to give me a satisfactory explanation." Hua Yi stared at Qin Feiyong angrily. Qin Feiyong looked at Hua Yi and couldn't help but laugh. Mermaid Princess and Fire Lotus also held back their cheeks until they were red. At this moment, Hua Yi's head was bulging with several big bumps. His clothes were also torn, and his body was full of bruises. Especially his eyes, they were like two panda eyes. He looked extremely miserable. "You're still laughing. What did I do wrong to suffer like this?" Hua Yi felt wronged. Qin Feiyong coughed dryly and stepped forward to pat Hua Yi's shoulder. He shook his head and sighed. "To be honest, you asked for it." After saying that, he pulled Mermaid Princess and walked forward without looking back. "I asked for it." Hua Yi pointed at his nose with a dumbfounded expression. Qin Rushuang glanced at Hua Yi indifferently and also left. "What do you mean? Did I offend her in some way?" Hua Yi looked at Qin Rushuang's back and looked at Fire Lotus, who was secretly laughing, and asked. Fire Lotus moved closer to Hua Yi's ear and laughed softly. "Do you still remember what you said at the Jade Zither Tower?" "Jade Zither Tower?" Hua Yi was stunned and asked suspiciously, "What did I say?" "You forgot so quickly? Let me remind you. At that time, you said that a certain woman was an old woman. Fire Lotus chuckled and turned to chase after Qin Feiyang and the other two. Old woman? Did I say something like that? I don't think so. Hua Yi scratched his head, his face full of suspicion. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. He quivered and looked up at Qin Rushuang's back. Could she be that woman who could play the zither and was at the level of a great-grandmother? How is this possible? Great-grandmother and so young? So beautiful? Hua Yi stood there in shock, unable to recover for a long time. Brother Hua, if you don't hurry up, the people from Empyrean Palace might have to pack up. Qin Feiyang's voice rang out. Hua Yi came back to his senses and shook his head with a bitter smile. Trouble comes from careless talk. How could he have thought that a casual sentence would cause him to suffer like this? He's Jiang Haotian. So he's also preparing to enter Empyrean Palace. Looks like we'll have another formidable opponent this time. It doesn't matter if he's a formidable opponent. What annoys me the most is that he has such a beautiful woman by his side. And there's more than one. Gosh, it's really a few fresh flowers inserted in a pile of cow dung. After knowing Qin Feiyang's identity, no one dared to come and harass him. However, they all had a look of righteous indignation. Soon, the central square entered the sight of Qin Feiyang and the others. At this moment, there were many young talents in the square. Each of them had an extraordinary temperament. After hearing the commotion, they all turned their heads and looked at Qin Feiyang and the others. He's actually here too. Many people couldn't help but frown. He's finally here. And the middle-aged man who had been squatting outside the square looked at Qin Feiyang, muttered in a low voice, and immediately turned and disappeared into the crowd. Chapter 1966. When Qin Feiyang and the others entered the square, everyone stepped back and made a path for them. Hua Yi said, Brother Jiang, you have to thank Feng Zijuan for your current fame. Yes, I have to thank him. Qin Feiyang snickered. He had become famous by stepping on Feng Zijuan's shoulder. Otherwise, who would recognize a small figure like him? However, the dozen or so enforcers in the middle of the square didn't even look at Qin Feiyang and the others. The old man in white sat at the table with his head lowered. He didn't react at all. After all, their statuses were different. In their eyes, Qin Feiyang and Feng Zijuan's matter was simply a small squabble, not worth mentioning. The five of them walked to the table. The old man in white didn't raise his head. He took out a black token from his yin and yang ring and said, Name Cultivation. Jiang Haotian, initial stage god of war. Qin Feiyang stood at the front and looked at the old man in white. The old man in white waved his hand and a ray of light shot into the token. Then he threw the token to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang grabbed the token and looked at the old man in white suspiciously. Seeing that the old man didn't want to explain, he pulled the mermaid princess to the side. Why are you pulling me? Mermaid princess thought. You can't enter Jiuqian Palace. Qin Feiyang thought. Why? Mermaid princess didn't understand. Didn't you see those guys before? They saw you as a piece of cake. Qin Feiyang snorted. Mermaid princess was dazed. Then she smiled and said, Are you jealous? No. Qin Feiyang coughed and shook his head expressionlessly. If you're not jealous, why don't you let me enter Jiuqian Palace? Mermaid princess covered her mouth and laughed. Qin Feiyang looked embarrassed and said, Anyway, no matter what, I won't let you show your face outside. All right. The mermaid princess nodded helplessly. However, his heart was filled with happiness, because the more Qin Feiyang behaved like this, the more it proved that he cared about her. Hua Yi, great success, war god. Hua Yi was the second. Jiang Rushuang, new war god. Qin Rushuang was the third. Jiang Fire Lotus, war god level 1. Fire Lotus was the fourth. The three of them also received a token each. 1 advanced stage war god, 2 low stage war gods, and 1 beginner stage war god. Their cultivation isn't that great, but how dare they offend Feng Zijuan? Could it be that they really have some big shot backing them up? Everyone grumbled inwardly. Jiang Haotian! At this moment, a clear and crisp voice rang out. This voice! Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a woman in white standing outside the square, panting as she looked at Qin Feiyang. There was also a trace of anger and grievance in his eyes. That was right. This person was Shangguan Qiu. The middle-aged man who had been squatting outside the square was sent by her. When the middle-aged man went back to report to her that Qin Feiyang finally appeared, she immediately ran over. She's also here for Jiang Haotian. But looking at her, she seems a bit angry. Did Jiang Haotian offend her somehow? Looks like there's going to be a good show. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang gloatingly. Shangguan Qiu was not only beautiful, but also powerful. Most importantly, she really had a backer. It could be said that almost no one in the younger generation of the entire northern region dared to offend her. Even the top monstrous geniuses of the Nine Heavens Palace had to be respectful to her. And Shangguan Qiu was indeed a bit angry now. These few days, she didn't even take a step out of the treasure house because she wanted to wait for Qin Feiyang. But this stinky man seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth and never appeared again. She was even going crazy. At the same time, Qin Feiyang and the others also looked at Shangguan Qiu. Fire Lotus snickered. Qin Dage, your strategy of loosening the reins only to grasp them better is indeed effective. As expected, Qin Feiyang smiled, but just as he finished speaking, he felt a sharp pain in his waist. He quickly turned his head and saw the mermaid princess glaring at him fiercely. Her little demonic claws were also clutching the flesh of his waist, refusing to let go. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang endured the pain and said to himself. The mermaid princess revealed a devilish smile and said to herself, not bad. It's only been a few days, and you've already hooked up with a girl. It's a misunderstanding. Qin Feiyang quickly said to himself. Is it a misunderstanding? Then how do you explain the grievance on her face? The mermaid princess snorted coldly. I really didn't. Qin Feiyang felt bitter in his heart. There are many people here now, so I'll save you some face. When there's no one around, I'll interrogate you properly. The mermaid princess snorted and finally let go of her little demonic claws. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but feel a headache coming. Then he noticed that Hui and the others were looking at him strangely. His expression suddenly became unnatural. Qin Dage, why are you and sister-in-law flirting with each other? Fire Lotus looked at the two suspiciously. Ahem. Qin Feiyang choked on his own saliva. Flirting with each other? It's clearly suffering, okay? Jiang Haotian, I'm calling you. Can't you hear me? Seeing that Qin Feiyang ignored him, Shangguan Qiu became angry again. There are still people waiting to register. If there's nothing else, hurry up and leave. The hoarse voice of the old man in white also sounded with a hint of displeasure. Yes, Qin Feiyang hurriedly responded. He turned around and pulled the mermaid princess toward Shangguan Qiu. Fire Lotus, so your brother is also a henpecked husband. Hui glanced at the mermaid princess and laughed secretly. Henpecked husband? Fire Lotus was stunned. So what if I'm henpecked husband? It's still better than someone who has no one to control him. Qin Rushuang glanced at Hui indifferently and left without looking back. Hui was slightly stunned and cried out in grievance. Who did I offend? Miss Shangguan, it's been a few days. How are you? Qin Feiyang walked out of the square and smiled at Shangguan Qiu. Don't laugh. Just looking at your face makes me angry. Shangguan Qiu snorted coldly. Did I offend you? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. You didn't. You told me that before you gave me the elixir, you came to the treasure pavilion every day. But after you gave me the elixir, you disappeared. What do you mean by that? Shangguan Qiu said angrily. Elixir? Disappeared. What's going on? The people around looked at each other in confusion. Qin Feiyang glanced at the crowd and said telepathically, Miss, there are too many people here. Can we not talk about the elixir? I didn't say the name of the elixir. What are you afraid of? Shangguan Qiu snorted inwardly and asked, Tell me honestly, did you disappear on purpose? On purpose? How is that possible? I was busy. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Only a fool would believe you. Shangguan Qiu sneered and grabbed Qin Feiyang. Let's go to the treasure pavilion and have a good talk. What's going on? Shangguan Qiu actually took the initiative to grab a man's hand? This is unprecedented. Could this be the legendary love triangle? Don't talk about it. It's possible. It's because Shangguan Qiu looked like he was wronged. I guess it's a relationship problem. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang, Shangguan Qiu, and the mermaid princess, dumbfounded. Shangguan Qiu was slightly stunned when she heard the discussion. Her cheeks flushed, and she said angrily, What are you talking about? Nothing, nothing. People waved their hands, and their eyes became more and more ambiguous. At the same time, the mermaid princess's face became more and more unpleasant. She looked at Qin Feiyang with more and more hostility. Qin Feiyang saw that the situation was not good. He hurriedly shook off Shangguan Qiu and frowned. Some people just want to see the world in chaos. The more we explain, the more excited they become. Let's go. It's all your fault. Shangguan Qiu stared at Qin Feiyang and took out an altar. The central square was not far from the treasure pavilion, but she could not stand such criticism. However, just as Shangguan Qiu was about to revive the altar, a sword light flashed across the sky and slashed toward Qin Feiyang and the others. People were shocked. What was going on? Qin Feiyang and the others were also shocked. Why would someone attack them? Preposterous! How dare you attack me? Shangguan Qiu came to her senses and was furious. She slapped the air and her divine power roared out. The sword light was instantly shattered. Who is it? Shangguan Qiu shouted and looked around. It's me. A cold voice sounded. People looked toward the voice and saw a woman in red standing in the back of the crowd with a red battle sword in her hand. But she was wearing a mask, so they could not see her face. However, the eyes that were exposed flickered with a shocking cold light. Shangguan Qiu sized up the woman in red, his eyes full of suspicion. Qin Feiyang and the others were also confused. But when they saw the battle sword in the woman's hand, Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus's pupils shrank. It's her. Who are you? Why did you attack us? Shangguan Qiu raised his eyebrows. The woman in red did not answer. She walked toward them step by step. You don't want to talk? Shangguan Qiu's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Wait. Qin Feiyang reached out and stopped Shangguan Qiu. What? Shangguan Qiu was suspicious. She's here to kill me, Qin Feiyang said. Kill you? Shangguan Qiu was stunned. Qin Feiyang did not explain. He let go of the mermaid princess and stepped forward to face the woman in red. We've been looking for you, but you came to Sky Dragon City without us knowing. The woman in red stared at Qin Feiyang and said angrily. Qin Feiyang sighed deeply and said, I didn't expect you to come to Sky Dragon City. Why? Are you afraid that I'll see you? The woman in red sneered. I don't mean that. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then what do you mean? If you don't want to marry me, just say it. Why do you have to hide? The woman in red shouted angrily. As soon as these words were spoken, it immediately caused a huge uproar. And they're in a four-way relationship? What's this guy doing? Why does he have so many women? But it also shows that he's not a good guy, seducing one after another. This kind of person is a disgrace to us men. He's a scum. This is really annoying. People were discussing angrily. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. What's going on? Chapter 1967. Qin Feiyang looked at the lady in red and frowned. Let's talk in private. Afraid of embarrassing yourself? You're afraid, but I'm not. We have to make it clear in front of everyone today, so that everyone knows what kind of person you are. The lady in red laughed angrily. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice, Don't be unreasonable, okay? How dare you say I'm unreasonable? The lady in red was furious. She raised the battle sword in her hand and slashed towards Qin Feiyang. Boom! But at this moment, the old man in white sitting in the middle of the square suddenly released a powerful aura. He stared at Qin Feiyang and the others and shouted, This is Sky Dragon City. No violence is allowed. If you have a grudge, go outside the city and settle it. Feeling the white-clothed old man's terrifying majesty, a trace of fear crept into the red-clothed woman's eyes. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank. The aura of the old man in white had already surpassed that of a war god. Let's go outside the city. Shangguan Qiu waved his hand impatiently and opened a teleportation altar. Outside the city, in the sky above a forest, Qin Feiyang and the others appeared one after another. The lady in red also followed. Once she appeared, without saying anything, she slashed towards Qin Feiyang with a battle sword in her hand. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. He teleported and dodged to the side. Why are you dodging? The lady in red was furious. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice, Some things are not as simple as you think. Then tell me, how complicated is it? The lady in red roared and waved her battle sword crazily. Qin Feiyang did not fight back. He kept dodging. What? He asked suspiciously. Fire Lotus, who is she? Why does she hate Brother Jiang so much? It's a long story. Fire Lotus sighed deeply. She looked at Qin Feiyang and said, She has lost her mind. Let her calm down first. Shut up. This is between us. What does it have to do with you? The woman in red said angrily. Fire Lotus said, Some things aren't as simple as you think. It's not simple. He has so many women by his side. Even the manager of the treasure pavilion is his woman. How could he possibly fall for me? The woman in red sneered. When did I become his woman? Can you stop talking nonsense? Shangguan Qiu said angrily. What did this have to do with her? Why did she have to drag her into this? You do need to calm down. Qin Feiyang suddenly used the movement character art and landed behind the red-robed woman, slapping the back of her head with his palm. The woman in red fainted on the spot. The sword in his hand also flew out. So fast! Shangguan Qiu's pupils contracted. Even she had not been able to catch a glimpse of Qin Feiyang at that moment. In the meantime, Fire Lotus stepped forward and hugged the woman in red. She grabbed her sword and looked up at Qin Feiyang, asking, What should we do? I don't know either. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then let's find a place to let her sleep for a while. Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyang nodded. Fire Lotus looked around and fixed her eyes on a mountain peak in the distance. She then flew toward the peak with the woman in red in her arms. Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed and landed beside the mermaid princess. He looked at Hua Yi and said with a smile, Brother Hua, I have something to deal with. You go back to the Yuqin Tower first. We'll meet outside the city tomorrow morning. Okay. Hua Yi nodded and left alone. After Hua Yi left, Shangguan Qiu looked back at Qin Feiyang and said, Jiang Haotian, I've realized that anything related to you is not a good thing. I didn't ask you to come. You can leave now. I won't stop you. Qin Feiyang said lightly. You! Shangguan Qiu stared at Qin Feiyang angrily. Qin Feiyang ignored him. He grabbed the mermaid princess hand and said with a smile, "Don't get me wrong. She came to me because she has business to discuss. But it seems that we can't talk about it now." "Who said we can't talk about it?" Shangguan Qiu said hurriedly. "Tell me, how many divine gems do you need to sell me the formula of the Juku Yellow Dragon Elixir?" "Divine gems?" Qin Feiyong was stunned and said with a smile, "Steward, are you sure? How can the formula of this elixir be bought with divine gems? Besides, I don't plan to sell it to you." Shangguan Qiu frowned and said, "If you don't want to sell it, why did you give me the elixir?" Qin Feiyong said, "I gave you the elixir to let you know the value of this elixir. I believe you've tried it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to me in person." "Yes, I've tried it. It's exactly as you said." Shangguan Qiu nodded. Qin Feiyong said, "In that case, as a shrewd businessman, you should know that it's impossible for me to sell you the formula." "Then tell me, what's your plan?" Shangguan Qiu asked. Her face was full of disappointment. In fact, she had expected that it would be impossible to get the formula. However, the formula of this elixir was too tempting. Therefore, she had a glimmer of hope. Now that her hope was dashed, she could only settle for the next best thing. "My plan," Qin Feiyong pondered for a while and said with a smile, "Actually, I'm very easy to satisfy. Let's work together." "Work together?" Shangguan Qiu frowned. "Yes, we'll work together and share the benefits equally." Qin Feiyong said, "If that's the case, it'll involve a lot of problems. How are we going to split the benefits? Who will provide the herbs? Also, if you don't want divine gems, what do you want?" "Wait," Shangguan Qiu said. Qin Feiyong said, "I don't care about divine gems. I want soul stones." "Soul stones?" Shangguan Qiu raised his eyebrows immediately. "I know that the treasure school doesn't use soul stones for transactions. However, if you want to work with me, you have to use soul stones. There's no room for negotiation." Qin Feiyong said, "You're going too far." Shangguan Qiu was very dissatisfied. "Then forget it," Qin Feiyong said with a faint smile. Shangguan Qiu was quite angry. "Young Master Jiang, you have to think carefully. If you leave the treasure school, even if you have the formula, it's not worth much." "Is that so?" Qin Feiyong laughed. "Don't you know? The treasure school has branches in all the big and small towns in the entire northern region. In other words, the resources of the northern region are basically under the control of the treasure school. As long as the treasure school says the word, no one will sell you the herbs. Without the herbs, what's the value of your Juku Yellow Dragon Elixir?" Shangguan Qiu joked. From the beginning, she realized that she was in a passive position, so she wanted to take advantage of this to take the initiative. "I won't doubt the ability of the treasure school. However, the treasure school is not the only one in the northern region. There's also the Ninth Heaven Palace. I believe that the Ninth Heaven Palace won't listen to the orders of the treasure school." Qin Feiyong said with a smile. "This bastard," Shangguan Qiu cursed in her heart. Why was he so difficult to deal with? Indeed, although the treasure school was powerful, it could not interfere in the affairs of the Ninth Heaven Palace. Think about it carefully. We'll talk when you've made up your mind." Qin Feiyong smiled faintly. He turned and led the mermaid princess and Qin Rushuang to the peak of the mountain where the fire lotus was located. Wait, seeing this, Shangguan Qiu was very anxious. However, she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. She lowered her head, feeling extremely irritated. Whoosh! Just as Qin Feiyong and the others left, a young man in purple suddenly appeared in front of Shangguan Qiu. Shangguan Qiu was stunned. She looked up at the young man in purple and frowned. "Who are you?" The young man in purple smiled. "Who I am is not important. What's important is the elixir formula of the Juku Yellow Dragon Elixir. How do you know about the Juku Yellow Dragon Elixir?" "Are you following us?" Shangguan Qiu's eyes flashed coldly. I am indeed following you. However, I didn't hear about the Juku Yellow Dragon Elixir from you. The young man in purple said. What do you mean? Shangguan Qiu frowned. The young man in purple said, I mean, I also have the elixir formula of the Juku Yellow Dragon Elixir. Chapter 1968. What? Shangguan Qiu was shocked. I'm not lying to you. The young man in purple took out an elixir from his chest. Shangguan Qiu took a look. It was the 9-Chu Yellow Dragon Elixir. She looked at the young man in purple and asked, Do you know Jiang Haotian? That's none of your business. The young man in purple smiled. Shangguan Qiu's eyes twinkled. She asked, You showed up to cooperate with me? Yes. The young man in purple nodded. What's your condition? Shangguan Qiu asked. Jiang Haotian asked for soul stones, but I only asked for divine gems. The young man in purple smiled. Is there such a good deal? Shangguan Qiu looked at the young man in purple suspiciously. Yes, there is such a good deal. However, all the herbs will be provided by the treasure school, and I'm only responsible for refining them. We'll split the auction price 50-50. The young man in purple said. This, Shangguan Qiu hesitated. Although the treasure school would provide the herbs 50-50 compared to Qin Feiyang's condition, it was like a pie falling from the sky. Actually, you don't have to think too much. I don't have any other purpose. I just want to suppress Jiang Haotian. The young man in purple laughed. Suppress Jiang Haotian, Shangguan Qiu murmured. The young man in purple smiled. Steward, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Shangguan Qiu thought for a while and nodded. Okay, let's cooperate. Let Jiang Haotian go to hell. The young man in purple laughed and stretched out his hand. You're indeed a smart man. I wish us a happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. Shangguan Qiu also stretched out her hand and shook hands with the young man in purple. The purple-clothed young man smiled. He lifted his head and looked at the mountain peak where Qin Feiyang and the others were. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He looked at Shangguan Qiu and said, I have something to do now. We will discuss the details tomorrow. Then I'll wait for you at the treasure school. Shangguan Qiu said. See you. After the purple-clothed youth finished speaking, he disappeared without a trace. At the mountain peak in the distance, Qin Feiyang did not know he was intercepted. He bent down and took off the woman's mask. Looking at the familiar face, his expression was complicated. Qin Rushuang asked, Is she Guosweki? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Although Guosweki wore a mask and intended to conceal her identity, the sword revealed her identity. Because this battle sword was the Fire Dragon Divine Sword, the mermaid princess asked, Then what do you plan to do with her? A cold glint flashed in Qin Rushuang's eyes. Is there even a need to ask? Kill him. It's too cruel to kill her. After all, she was also kept in the dark about the engagement. The mermaid princess said, Girl, you're still speaking up for her? Do you have a fever? Qin Rushuang touched the mermaid princess's forehead and frowned. I'm not speaking up for her. She's just too pitiful. Look at her now. She still thinks that the marriage contract is real. The mermaid princess said, You're overflowing with sympathy. Qin Rushuang shook her head and said, If we really let her go, not only will she continue to pester us, but she will also pose a great threat to us. What threat? The mermaid princess was suspicious. She knows our true identity. Wouldn't it be troublesome if she leaks it out? Also, you should know that the Guo family's destruction is also related to us. Qin Rushuang said. Seems like it. The mermaid princess nodded in realization. If Guosweki knew about this, she would definitely think of ways to take revenge on them. That's why we must not let this woman live. A shocking murderous intent appeared in Qin Rushwang's eyes. She raised her index finger and pointed in the air. A streak of divine power immediately appeared and swept toward Gwasweki's forehead. However, at this moment, Gwasweki, who was lying on the ground, and the fire dragon divine sword disappeared from their sight. Qin Rushwang was stunned. She immediately released her divine sense and covered the surroundings. However, she did not find any trace of the spatial divine item in the void. What's going on? Everyone looked at the void of space in shock. Qin Feiyong looked around and his eyes flickered. I think that spatial divine item should be embedded with the silken sealing stone. Damn it! Who could it be? Qin Rushwang's face was as cold as frost. The other party had rescued Gwasweki, which meant that they had been secretly following them. In other words, the other party had heard everything they had just said. What should we do now? The mermaid princess looked at Qin Feiyong and Qin Rushwang and asked in a panic. Qin Feiyong grabbed the mermaid princess' hand and smiled. Even if Gwasweki wants to take revenge on me and reveals my identity, it doesn't matter. You're still smiling so easily. Qin Rushwang glared at Qin Feiyong angrily. Yeah, Qin Dage, we can't be careless about this. What if the person who rescued Gwasweki is Feng Yuan's lackey? Fire Lotus added. Feng Yuan? Qin Feiyong was stunned. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head and said, I don't think it's him. How do you know? Qin Rushwang asked. Think about it. In the eyes of Feng Yuan and the others, a nobody like Gwasweki is not worthy of their rescue. Qin Feiyong said. You're right. Fire Lotus nodded. Right what? We're not Feng Yuan. How do we know what he's thinking? Qin Rushwang said. Actually, you don't have to worry. If the ancestor used to have a certain status in the Ninth Heaven Palace, it may be a good thing for us if his identity is exposed. Qin Feiyong said. Qin Rushwang said, what if Father has turned against the Ninth Heaven Palace? I'll say it again. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earthweir. No matter what the relationship between the ancestor and the Ninth Heaven Palace is, I won't let any of you get hurt. Qin Feiyong smiled. What an arrogant guy. Qin Rushwang rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of a smile in the depths of her eyes, because she knew that if they were in danger, Qin Feiyong would definitely be the first one to stand in front of everyone. But then again, don't you think that saving someone without a word is a little familiar? Qin Feiyong frowned and said, Familiar? Qin Rushwang and the other two were suspicious. I remember that Mu Tianyang and the demon ancestor used to do this kind of thing before. Qin Feiyong said, Mu Tianyang, the demon ancestor. Hearing these two names, Qin Rushwang and the mermaid princess's eyes suddenly trembled. The dusty memories also surged like a tide. Actually, we can't put all our attention on Feng Yuan. After all, we still have some old rivals in the ancient world. They are all more difficult to deal with than Feng Yuan. Now that the name Jiang Haotian has spread, I think they should be showing up soon. Qin Feiyong said. Not only was he not nervous, but there was also some anticipation in his eyes. Can you stop being so careless all the time? Let's not talk about Mu Tianyang first. You know the demon ancestor's methods better than anyone else. With a heaven-defying divine artifact, you can't do anything to him except open up the slaughter zone. Qin Rushwang said angrily. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, Hasn't the demon ancestor turned over a new leaf? That's just his one-sided story. Do you still believe it? Qin Rushwang said angrily. All right. Let's not talk about this for now. Let's be prepared for our identities to be exposed. Qin Feiyong said. Although it was only Qin Rushwang's guess that the ancestor and Empyrean Palace had turned against each other, if it was true and their identities were exposed, the situation would become extremely serious. In fact, it was not that he was not worried. but he did not want to show it, because now he was the pillar of support in everyone's hearts. If even he panicked, the people around him would definitely panic even more. Therefore, he had to remain calm and calm to stabilize everyone's hearts. Chapter 1969. At the same time, Sky Dragon City, Jade Zither Tower. On the 7th floor, in a room, the fragrance of tea filled the air. A young man sat beside the coffee table, holding an exquisite teacup and slowly tasting it. This person was 7 feet tall, with a high nose bridge and golden eyes that seemed to be cast from gold leaf. 2 thick eyebrows, like 2 sharp swords, exuded an astonishing sharpness. If Qin Feiyang was here, he would definitely recognize him at a glance. He was Mu Tianyang. At this moment, Mu Tianyang had already taken off his dragon robe, wearing a purple robe and a purple crown. However, his temperament did not change at all. He sat there like an emperor, emitting a terrifying and oppressive aura. Dong! Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Mu Tianyang looked up at the door and said, "Come in." The door was pushed open, and another young man in purple strode into the room. After closing the door, the young man in purple quickly walked in front of the man and said respectfully, "Greetings, ancestor." Since he would address Mu Tianyang as such, the identity of the young man in purple was naturally revealed. "Mu Qing," Mu Tianyang asked, "how is it?" Mu Qing said, "Not only Qin Feiyang, but the mermaid princess and Qin Rushuang also came to the ancient world." Mermaid, Qin Rushuang. One is Qin Feiyang's most beloved woman, and the other is Qin Beishan's biological daughter. It's not strange that they entered the ancient world. I'm most concerned about the white-eyed wolf, Tang Hai, and the others. Mu Tianyang said, "I didn't see them, but I think they should be cultivating in the ancient castle." Mu Qing said. Mu Tianyang took a sip of tea, shook his head, and sighed. "I thought that Qin Feiyang would stay in the Great Qin for at least a few years before entering the ancient world. I didn't expect it to be so fast." Mu Qing snorted coldly. "Coming to the ancient castle is courting death." "Courting death? Haven't you suffered enough at his hands? You still dare to underestimate him?" Mu Tianyang raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "Ancestor, please calm your anger." Mu Qing's expression changed as she said hurriedly, "Remember, never underestimate him. In the past, it was because I underestimated him that I ended up in such a miserable state." Mu Tianyang snorted coldly. "Mu Qing will bear this in mind." Mu Qing replied respectfully. Mu Tianyang's expression eased a lot as he asked, "Is there anything else?" Mu Qing said. He took out the Juka Yellow Dragon Elixir and prepared to cooperate with Shangguan Qiu. This is indeed his style. Mu Tianyang raised his eyebrows. "However, this matter has already been ruined by me." Mu Qing sneered. "What do you mean?" Mu Tianyang was stunned and looked at Mu Qing curiously. Mu Qing briefly explained the situation at that time. "Fool!" After hearing this, Mu Tianyang not only did not praise him, but also became angry. "Ancestor, did I do something wrong?" Mu Qing frowned. "Wrong. Very wrong. You actually used divine gems to trade for the Juka Yellow Dragon Elixir. Don't you think this is a reckless waste of God's gift? To be honest, compared with Qin Feiyang, you're not just a little bit better." Mu Tianyang was furious. "I also thought about this. Qin Feiyang offered soul stones. If I went to Qin Feiyang, his offer would definitely be lower than Qin Feiyang's. Otherwise, why would Shangguan Qiu cooperate with us? What's more, I did this to suppress him. Think about it. If Shangguan Qiu really agreed to cooperate with him, he would get a lot of soul stones and the time formation of the ancient castle. Wouldn't his cultivation improve by leaps and bounds?" Mu Qing felt very wronged. "Although you are right, you can't use divine gems. Qin Feiyang needs soul stones, so do we. You can also use soul stones to trade, as long as your share is lower than Qin Feiyang's. For example, if Qin Feiyang and Shangguan Qiu split it 50-50, then we can split it 40-60. In this way, Shangguan Qiu will still cooperate with us, right? Mu Tianyang said angrily. This, Mu Qing was stunned. At that time, he only wanted to suppress Qin Feiyang, so he did not think so much. After pondering for a while, Mu Qing looked at Mu Tianyang and said, "How about I talk to Shangguan Qiu again?" Forget it. Businessmen hate people who go back on their words the most. In their eyes, this kind of person is very unreliable. If we change our mind now and talk to her again, I think she would rather cooperate with Qin Feiyang than us. Mu Tianyang rubbed his forehead and said. Mu Qing lowered his arms and said, "Ancestor, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I didn't think it through." Mu Tianyang said, "It's good that you know you are wrong. Think more before you do things in the future. Don't be impulsive." "Yes," Mu Qing replied. Mu Tianyang pondered for a while and said, "Actually, this matter hasn't reached the point of no return." "Ancestor, what's your plan?" Mu Qing was suspicious. "Don't we still have the 9 turns dragon blood elixir? Let's cooperate with Shangguan Qiu first. When we taste the dessert, we will show the 9 turns dragon blood elixir. When I think about it, she probably won't refuse to trade with soul stones." Mu Tianyang said. "That makes sense." Mu Qing nodded with a smile and said, "Also, there are potential elixirs. Mu Tianyang was angry again and shouted, "I said you were stupid. You really don't know it." Mu Qing was stunned. Was he wrong again? Do you know why Qin Feiyang didn't use the potential elixir but the 9 turns yellow dragon elixir? It's because the potential elixir is too heaven-defying. Don't you know that treasuring a jade ring is a crime? Once the treasure pavilion knows about the existence of the potential elixir, what do you think they will do? They will definitely think of ways to force us to hand over the elixir recipe. Even if the treasure pavilion doesn't do that, what about others? Once they find out the origin of the potential elixir, will they let us go? Mu Qing, oh Mu Qing, you really have to use your brain properly. Right now, we are no longer in the Great Qin or the Forgotten Continent. We are in the ancient world. In this place, we don't have any backing, and our strength is even more like ants. If we are not careful, we will be smashed to pieces. Mu Tianyang looked at Mu Qing as if he expected better from him. "I got it. If I encounter any problems in the future, I will consider it thoroughly." Mu Qing nodded. All right. Is there anything else?" Mu Tianyang waved his hand and asked. "Yes. I saved a woman from Qin Feiyang's hands." Mu Qing said. "A woman?" Mu Tianyang was suspicious. Mu Qing waved his hand, and a woman in red appeared on the ground out of thin air. It was Guosweki. At this moment, she was still unconscious. "Who is she?" Mu Tianyang sized up Guosweki and asked. "Her name is Guosweki. I don't know who she is exactly, but it seems that she is engaged to Qin Feiyang. However, this engagement seems to be fake." Mu Qing said. "Engagement?" Mu Tianyang was stunned. "I think she seems to hate Qin Feiyang very much, so I saved her along the way." Mu Qing said. Mu Tianyang pondered for a moment, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Then let's keep her. Perhaps she will be a useful chess piece." In the ancient castle, everyone went back to cultivating. Only Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus did not cultivate. Fire Lotus could not cultivate because she could not. Qin Feiyang leaned against the wall absent-mindedly. He lowered his head and crossed his arms, as if he was thinking about something. Fire Lotus asked suspiciously, "What are you thinking about? Why are you so engrossed?" "I'm thinking about Gongzi Feng and Gao Xiaolong. Why haven't they sent me a message yet? Did something happen?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "I don't think so," Fire Lotus muttered. Time passed. It was dawn. Buzz. Finally, Qin Feiyang's image crystal rang. He was refreshed and quickly took it out. A virtual image appeared. It was Gongzi Feng. You must have waited for a long time, Brother Jiang. Gongzi Feng smiled. However, although he was smiling, his forehead was full of sweat. What are you doing? Qin Feiyang looked at him in confusion. Gongzi Feng shook his head and sighed. I still underestimated my father's hatred for me. It's really not easy to find out this information. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. I went to look for him, but he didn't want to see me at all. In the end, I had no choice but to try Feng Zihan, although my elder sister didn't like me. Fortunately, I wasn't wary of her. I got some very useful information from her. Gongzi Feng smiled. Qin Feiyang asked, Your elder sister's name is Feng Zihan? You probably don't know that the master of the Jade Zither Pavilion is my elder sister. Gongzi Feng said, So it's her. Qin Feiyang was surprised. My elder sister's ability and talent far surpass Feng Zijuan. In the Nine Heavens Palace, she's definitely a monstrous figure. Do you know the heaven ranking and earth ranking of the Nine Heavens Palace? Gongzi Feng asked. Qin Feiyang shook his head. The heaven ranking and earth ranking are the most important rankings in the Nine Heavens Palace. Those who can enter the heaven ranking and earth ranking are the strongest disciples of the Nine Heavens Palace. My elder sister is on the heaven ranking. We'll talk about the details after you enter the Nine Heavens Palace. Right now, I'll tell you a very important piece of news. Gongzi Feng's face turned gloomy. What news is it that made you so worried? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Gongzi Feng said solemnly, My grandfather and father are going to make a move against you in tomorrow's test. What? Qin Feiyang was shocked. Fire Lotus frowned. They're going to tamper with the test. But they won't make a move personally. Because during the test, there will be many important figures in the Nine Heavens Palace watching. They won't dare to be too presumptuous, Gongzi Feng said. Then, how are they going to make a move? Qin Feiyang didn't understand. They've secretly bribed a group of people. These people are all here to participate in the test. Moreover, they're all elites in this test. Their strength can't be underestimated. I'll draw up a name list and have Gao Xiaolong send it to you. Gongzi Feng said. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded and told Gongzi Feng the coordinates. Then that's all for now. Be careful tomorrow. Gongzi Feng reminded, and his figure quickly disappeared. Qin Feiyang also kept the image crystal and looked at Fire Lotus with a smile. See, no matter who it is, they have their value. If Gongzi Feng didn't help us this time, we would have been caught off guard. Gongzi Feng is really good, but I'm more curious. Who are these people that are willing to be Gongzi Feng's pawns? Fire Lotus's eyes flashed with a cold light. Literature Hall. Chapter 1970. About half an hour passed. Brother Jiang, where are you? A voice that sounded like a thief entered the castle. Qin Feiyang immediately left the castle and appeared at the peak of the mountain. The waning moon hung high in the sky. The surroundings were quiet. In front of Qin Feiyang, Gao Xiaolong hid his presence and looked around like a thief. I'm here, Qin Feiyang said. Gao Xiaolong's eyes lit up. He quickly ran to Qin Feiyang and took out a beast skin scroll. Qin Feiyang took the beast skin scroll and asked suspiciously, What are you doing? Gongzi Feng told me to be careful. It won't be good if someone follows us, Gao Xiaolong said in a low voice. Qin Feiyang was slightly surprised. He shook his head and said with a smile, That's very thoughtful, but it is indeed necessary. Tell Gongzi Feng that we should try not to meet in the future. Even when we are communicating, it's best to hide in a spatial divine object. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he He opened the beast's skin scroll and looked at it. Spatial divine object? Gao Xiaolong was stunned. He smiled bitterly and said, "Even Gongzi Feng doesn't have a spatial divine object, let alone me." "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. "Yes." Gao Xiaolong nodded. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said with a smile, "It seems that I have to find a spatial divine object for you." Gao Xiaolong was stunned when he heard this. He quickly said, "Thank you, Brother Jiang." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and continued to look at the beast skin scroll. There were hundreds of names recorded on it. Behind each name, there was a detailed introduction, such as family background, cultivation, personality, etc. Gongzi Feng said that most people are not a threat to you, only these few. Gao Xiaolong pointed at the last 5 names. Nieyun, Qi Hong, Hong Ping, Zhu Ge, Zhang Yunfei, Chao Jiun. Qin Feiyang looked at them one by one, and his expression changed. These 6 people were all perfect war gods, and they all had powerful family backgrounds. For example, the first Nieyun was the son of a city lord. This city lord was in charge of a city called Galaxy City. Not only did he have a group of terrifying experts under his command, but his own cultivation was also impressive. Gao Xiaolong said solemnly, "Other than these people, they have also bribed some divine monarch realm vicious beasts. Big Brother Jiang, this is not child's play. You must be careful." "What? There are more ferocious beasts." Qin Feiyang was bewildered. "Yes, but we haven't found out which ferocious beasts it is," Gao Xiaolong said. "Looks like they really want to kill me this time." Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, then put away the animal skin scroll and asked, "What's your sister's plan?" "Young master asked a few friends to take care of her during the examination, so you don't have to worry. However, I still hope that Big Brother Jiang will be able to lend me a hand when the time comes." Gao Xiaolong said, "All right, you go back first." "Wait, there's something I should tell you. Guo Sueki has also come to Sky Dragon City. I think she will also participate in the examination," Qin Feiyang said. "Guo Sueki?" Gao Xiaolong's eyes flashed with a cold light. "The enemy who killed my grandfather. I will not let her go." Qin Feiyang said, "I won't stop you from taking revenge, but you can't be impulsive." "I know this. Also, the examination's location will be at Sky Dragon Mountain Range." Gao Xiaolong said, "Sky Dragon Mountain Range?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "That's right. During the examination, you are not allowed to use spatial divine objects or even enter them. You are also not allowed to use the transmission altar, and naturally you're not allowed to have any outsiders to help you. The so-called outsiders are those who are not participating in the examination. The first 50 people to reach the stairway will be accepted as inner disciples. The rest will be outer disciples. As for the duration of the examination, there are only 2 days. Those who have not reached the stairway in 2 days will be eliminated." Gao Xiaolong explained. 2 days? Qin Feiyang frowned. He knew how big the Sky Dragon Mountain Range was. Rushing from Sky Dragon City to Nine Heavens Palace would not be a problem if he used a spatial divine object. However, the rules of the examination forbade the use of spatial divine objects. In that case, 2 days was not enough. There were too many fierce beasts in the Sky Dragon Mountain Range, and each one of them was extremely strong. In the depths of the mountain range, there were god, monarch, fierce beasts everywhere. For a divine lord, level vicious beast, killing a war god was as simple as crushing an ant. Therefore, it was impossible to cross the Sky Dragon Mountain Range and reach the stairway. Most importantly, those who participated in the examination would definitely kill each other. This was undoubtedly more difficult. It seemed like the Nine Heavens Palace's examination was not that easy to pass. To be honest, this examination is more difficult than the previous ones. I can already imagine the scene of corpses everywhere. Big Brother Jiang, you must not be careless. Gao Xiaolong reminded. Don't worry, I will do my best, Qin Feiyang said. Gao Xiaolong nodded and did not linger. He opened a transmission altar and left. Feng Yuan, you guys are really relentless. However, if a few perfection realm battle gods want to kill me, you guys are underestimating me, Qin Feiyang. Just wait and see, you will regret it. Qin Feiyang looked at the night sky and muttered. He entered the ancient castle and began to adjust his state of mind. He did not care about those who participated in the examination. Only the fierce beasts in the Sky Dragon mountain range were his biggest concern. Although the six-word divine formula could ignore major realms, the world was unpredictable. What if a powerful, fierce beast jumped out? Moreover, the six-word divine formula was his trump card. He did not want to reveal it so easily. After all, Gao Xiaolong had said that the important figures of Nine Heavens Palace would be watching the examination. If he revealed the six-word divine formula, it would definitely cause a commotion. This was not what he wanted. Time flew by. Early morning. The night dispersed, and everything came back to life. Outside the western city gate, at this moment there was a sea of people. At a glance, there were at least 100,000 people. Do any of you have any insider information? Where is the location of the examination? This kind of thing is confidential. How could anyone know? Everyone discussed as they waited for the arrival of the people from Nine Heavens Palace. The sun gradually rose from the horizon. Swoosh! Suddenly, a figure appeared in the sky above the plain. It was a middle-aged man wearing a black robe. He was 7 feet tall and had a cold face. His hands were behind his back, and his aura was unfathomable. It's Nine Heavens Palace's law enforcement elder, Feng Wenhai. Everyone quiet down. The originally noisy plane instantly fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at Feng Wenhai with eyes full of respect. Feng Wenhai glanced at the crowd and did not ask if anyone was present. He said directly, the location of the examination is in the Sky Dragon mountain range. What? Sky Dragon mountain range? Once these words came out, everyone's face changed color and was filled with fear. At this moment, 2 men and 2 women walked out from the city gate side by side. They stood behind the crowd and looked up at Feng Wenhai. It was Qin Feiyang and the others who had arrived late. However, at this moment, everyone was in a state of panic and did not notice them. Even if they did, they would definitely not be in the mood to pay attention to the 4 of them. Hua Yi sent a sound transmission. Brother Jiang, he is Feng Zijuan's father. Very strong, Qin Feiyang muttered. Of course, it is said that his cultivation has already surpassed the Divine Lord. What Yi said, Transcendental Divine Lord? Qin Feiyang was shocked. Wait a moment, Elder. Who doesn't know how dangerous the Sky Dragon mountain range is? Aren't you deliberately sending us to our deaths? This is not fair. Although the previous examinations were also very cruel, compared to this time, it is like heaven and earth. I can guarantee that no one in this examination will come back alive. After a moment of silence, many people began to protest. Feng Wenhai was expressionless and did not speak. He scanned the crowd. Suddenly, when he saw Qin Feiyang and the other 3, a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes. However, he did not look at them for long and immediately swept his gaze over the others. Elder, you are too much. You don't treat us as humans at all. The location of the examination must be changed. That's right. Even if it is your Nine Heaven Palace, you can't deliberately harm us. Everyone became angrier and angrier as they roared at Feng Wenhai. It is indeed a bit too much. What? Yi shook his head. Big brother Hui, are you also afraid? Fire Lotus covered her mouth and laughed. Sky Dragon mountain range is the headquarters of the beasts of the northern region. Do you think I am not afraid? Especially in the depths, a divine lord-level beast is enough to wipe out all of us here. Hui sighed and looked up at Feng Wenhai, frowning. What are the people of Nine Heaven Palace thinking? Time passed breath by breath. A moment later, Feng Wenhai finally opened his mouth and said coldly, "Have you all said enough? If you have, then shut up for the seat." Everyone's pupils shrank. The plane once again fell into dead silence. However, although everyone no longer said anything, their eyes still expressed their dissatisfaction. The location of the examination and how the examination will be conducted is decided by my Nine Heaven Palace. If you want to enter Nine Heaven Palace, you have to accept it. If you are afraid, then don't go in. This seat will not stop you. Next, this seat will explain the rules of the examination. Feng Wenhai completely ignored everyone's protest and continued to speak. The content was exactly the same as what Gong Zongfeng had inquired. Too much, too much. We can't even use spatial divine items. I give up on this examination. I give up too. My life is more important. After hearing the rules, a large number of angry roars sounded. Whatever. Last but not least, the first person to reach the stairway to heaven will be rewarded with a peak divine technique, a peak divine artifact, and 100,000 soul stones. This is a temporary decision made by the leaders and is also the greatest encouragement for you. Now the examination begins. After Feng Wenhai finished speaking, he turned around and left. What? Peak divine technique. Peak divine artifact. 100,000 soul stones. There has never been such a reward in history. Are we really going to give up? I'm a little unwilling. The reward is very generous, yes, but you have to be alive to enjoy it. If you're not afraid of death, then go. I won't participate anyway. Some people hesitated. Some people turned around and left without hesitation. But there were also people who resolutely rushed towards the Sky Dragon Mountain Range under the generous reward. For a time, the plane was in chaos. Literature Hall. Chapter 1971. Qin Feiyang and the other three were also deeply shocked at this moment. A pinnacle divine art, a pinnacle divine artifact, and 100,000 soul stones. This was really a big deal. Perhaps only Ninth Heaven Palace would be willing to take it out. He came back to his senses and turned to look at Qin Feiyang, saying, "Brother Jiang, should we also give up?" Give up? Qin Feiyang was stunned. As someone said before, although the reward is tempting, we need to be alive to enjoy it. What Yi said. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, saying, "If we also give up, won't Feng Yuan and the others' efforts be in vain?" Hua Yi was stunned and asked suspiciously, "What do you mean?" Hua Yi still did not know about Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai's plan. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "They want to make a move on us in the assessment. All the more reason we can't go." Hua Yi said, "With such a generous reward, even if I know it's a trap, I can't help it. Maybe this is one of Feng Yuan's plans." Qin Feiyang said, "What you're saying is that this reward is a bait targeted at us." Qin Rushuang raised her eyebrows. Qin Feiyang said, "Feng Yuan is the hall master of the resource hall, so the reward is definitely related to him." I see. The three of them suddenly understood. "Jiang Haotian, you really came. But you'd better not go, it's too dangerous." Several young men and women looked at Qin Feiyang and advised when they passed by Qin Feiyang and the others. "Thank you for your concern." Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "You won't listen. No one will sympathize with you when you die." The few of them snorted coldly and swaggered off. Fire Lotus looked at them and said, "Qin Dage, your identity doesn't seem to have been exposed." "Yes, it hasn't been exposed," Qin Feiyang replied. "Does this mean that the people who saved Guisweki are not Feng Yuan and the others?" Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin Rushuang and transmitted his voice. "What do you think?" "There's no need to think about it. It must be Mu Tianyang and the others who are using this kind of trick." Qin Rushuang transmitted her voice. They're really fast. However, this is only interesting. Otherwise, how boring would it be for me to be alone in the ancient realm? Qin Feiyang smiled secretly. Feng Yuan alone is enough of a headache. What's there to be bored about? Qin Rushuang rolled her eyes. Hua Yi glanced at the three of them and frowned. Brother Jiang, are we still partners? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. He nodded and said, yes, why? Since we are partners, shouldn't we be honest with each other? But look at the two of you now, flirting with each other and hiding everything from me. Is this how you treat me? Hua Yi said with dissatisfaction. Shut up. Who doesn't have any privacy? If you're honest enough, why don't you just tell us your identity? Qin Rushuang said. There's nothing wrong with my identity. Hua Yi looked innocent. Qin Rushuang said, do we look like idiots? Hua Yi smiled embarrassedly. Let's go. For the divine technique, divine weapon, and soul stone, we have to get first place no matter what. Qin Rushuang looked at the Sky Dragon mountain range and said firmly, Sister Rushuang, you're serious. Fire Lotus smiled. Of course. Let's go. Qin Rushuang waved her hand and rushed toward the Sky Dragon mountain range. Qin Feiyang and Hua Lian looked at each other and also chased after him. Sigh, these guys are really not afraid of death. Hua Yi shook his head and followed helplessly, looking at groups of people rushing into the Sky Dragon mountain range. Those who were afraid were struggling with their thoughts. Empyrean Palace, in front of the stairway to heaven. Feng Yuan and Feng Dahai stood side by side and looked at the void in front of them. There was an image in the void. It was the scene of everyone entering the Sky Dragon mountain range. At this moment, the two of them looked like they were observing the situation there, but in fact, they were looking at Qin Feiyang and the others. The white-haired old man guarding the stairway to heaven was still sitting at the side. But just like before, his eyes were closed and he did not care about anything. In the image, Qin Feiyang and the others quickly disappeared into the mountain. Feng Yuan and Feng Dahai looked away and looked at each other. A murderous intent flashed in their eyes at the same time. Feng Yuan waved his hand and the image in the void disappeared. Then, he looked at the white-haired old man and looked at Feng Wenhai. He smiled and said, Let's go back and report to everyone. Okay. Feng Wenhai nodded. The two of them turned into a stream of light and disappeared at the top of the stairway to heaven. The storm has come and the peace of the Ninth Heaven Palace is over. What will happen in the end? Just after Feng Yuan and Feng Dahai disappeared, the white-haired old man slowly opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the Sky Dragon city. He muttered to himself with anticipation, but soon he closed his eyes again. Like an ordinary old man, he did not feel oppressed at all. Boom! Sky Dragon mountain range. The border area. The battle had already begun. The battle between humans and beasts, the mutual destruction between humans, caused this mountain to be quickly swallowed by blood. Greed, selfishness, desire, all of these were displayed vividly at this moment. Too terrifying. This is simply Azura Hell. Qin Feiyang's group stood in the sky above a mountain ridge. Their pupils constricted tightly as they scanned the slaughter that was happening everywhere before them, as well as the dismembered corpses and severed limbs that were flying all over the sky. They had underestimated the cruelty of this assessment. It was just the beginning, and it was already so tragic. It was hard to imagine what they would find later. Fire Lotus shook her head and sighed. This kind of battle, this kind of sacrifice, is it really worth it? Is it worth it? This is a difficult topic to discuss. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. You still have the mood to sympathize with them? Quickly think about it. How should we go? Hua Yi said. Qin Feiyang looked ahead and his eyes flashed slightly. Let's go a little further and try to avoid the battle. Won't that take more time? Fire Lotus said. Yes. However, if we rush over like this, we will definitely not be able to avoid a fierce battle. At that time, we will waste even more time. Let's go. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and rushed into the forest below, heading southwest. Qin Rushuang and the other two looked at each other and immediately chased. Soon, the four of them rushed to the front of a canyon. After observing for a while, they did not sense any battle fluctuations in the canyon. The four of them went straight into the canyon. Roar! But not long after entering the canyon, a roar suddenly came from a fork in the front. Following closely, the earth shook and the mountains shook. A group of ferocious beasts rushed out from the ground. It was a group of mountain beasts. The smallest of them was more than 10 meters in size. The lowest cultivation base was at the war god level, and their numbers were as many as hundreds of them. With ferocious glints in their eyes, they aggressively pounced towards Qin Feiyang and the other three. "You're courting death." Fire Lotus's eyes flashed coldly. "Don't attack." Qin Feiyang grabbed Fire Lotus. "Why?" Fire Lotus was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said to himself, "If you attack, won't your undead power be exposed?" "That's true." Fire Lotus nodded, but then said, "Wait, no, if I don't want to expose my undead power, then I can only watch you guys fight. Won't I become a burden then?" "What are you thinking?" "How can we say that you're a burden?" "Don't worry, I'm here." Qin Feiyang laughed secretly. Just as Qin Feiyang was about to attack, Qin Rushuang took a step forward first. Divine power surged out, and dozens of sword shadows appeared instantly. Each sword shadow was hundreds of feet long. As if condensed from ice, cold currents swept in all directions. The world seemed to have entered a cold winter in an instant. The cold air was bone-piercing. "Kill!" Qin Rushuang roared. Dozens of sword shadows tore through the sky and slashed towards the pangolin beasts in all directions. Divine power shook all directions. Roar! Immediately, cries of agony could be heard. The pangolin beasts who had just become war gods instantly lost their lives. Even the low-level war god pangolin beasts fell into a pool of blood, no longer able to fight. The air was immediately filled with a pungent smell of blood. "Human, you're courting death." An angry roar could be heard, accompanied by a loud bang. A pangolin beast that was hundreds of feet long roared out from the ground. It had the cultivation of an advanced level war god. "You're the one who's courting death." Sword technique fusion. Qin Rushuang's eyes were as cold as ice. As her voice fell, the dozens of sword shadows merged together. Clang! A sword shadow that was thousands of feet long suddenly appeared. Divine power also instantly rose to another level. Following closely, the sword shadow pierced through the sky and slashed towards the pangolin beast. Roar! A cry of agony. The pangolin beast that had the cultivation of an advanced level war god was seriously injured by the sword, and blood flowed out. This, Qin Feiyang was shocked. "Get lost!" Qin Rushuang shouted. The pangolin beast's eyes trembled. With a hurried roar, it turned around and drilled into the ground. The other pangolin beasts also drilled into the ground as if they were fleeing for their lives. After a while, not a single pangolin beast could be found here. "Let's continue on our way." Qin Rushuang said, "Why do I feel that Sister Rushuang seems to have suddenly changed into a different person?" Fire Lotus was suspicious. "It's not strange, because she's too eager to find her father, and this requires great strength. Therefore, she's determined to get the reward this time. Naturally, she's full of enthusiasm." Qin Feiyang said, "Who's her father?" Hua Yi looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang and Qin Rushuang. "Her father is my ancestor." Qin Feiyang smiled and chased after Qin Rushuang with Fire Lotus. "Ancestor? Father? The difference in seniority is too big, isn't it?" Hua Yi's mouth twitched. After Qin Feiyang caught up with Qin Rushuang, he asked, What you used just now was the ice sword technique. Yes, Qin Rushuang nodded. I remember that last time at the miracle, the ice sword technique was only a perfect battle technique, right? Qin Feiyang said in surprise. Is that strange? Even you can upgrade a battle technique to a divine technique, let alone me. Let me tell you, not only have I upgraded the ice sword technique to a divine technique, but I've also upgraded it to a mid-tier divine technique. Qin Rushuang glanced at Qin Feiyang and smiled proudly. Ah, Qin Feiyang was stunned. Qin Rushuang said, Now you know, my comprehension is not worse than yours. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and said, After all, you're my ancestor's daughter. Daughter? Actually, there's something that I'm very concerned about now. Qin Rushuang pondered for a while and looked at Qin Feiyang. There was a hint of disappointment between her eyebrows. What's the matter? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Qin Rushuang was about to speak, but at this moment a golden light blade suddenly fell from the top of the mountain on the left and charged toward Qin Feiyang and the other three at lightning speed. Literature Museum. Chapter 1972. Someone's here. The four of them raised their heads and looked up, a cold light surging in their eyes. Clang! Qin Rushuang attacked again. Frost sword technique was formed. Dozens of sword shadows rushed into the sky and merged into one. They slashed at the golden light blade with a destructive aura. No. Seeing this, Huo Yi's expression changed as he shouted at Qin Rushuang. Rumble. But it was too late. Accompanied by a deafening sound, the golden light blade shattered the sword shadow as easily as crushing dry weeds. Puff! Qin Rushuang spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered back. I was too careless. She looked at the golden light blade with a bitter smile on her pale face. Stabbing others in the dark is not what a gentleman would do. Hua, he said angrily. With a stomp, the ground collapsed. He rushed into the sky, and his divine power roared in all directions as he threw a punch at the golden light blade. Ah, at that moment, Hua Yi also screamed as he was hit by the golden light blade and smashed into the ground. So strong? Fire Lotus was shocked. Qin Rushuang was only a beginner war god after all. But Hua Yi, who was a great success war god, was not a match for the golden light blade. How terrifying was the cultivation of the person hiding in the dark. Qin Feiyang looked at Hua Yi meaningfully and said to Fire Lotus, Take them back. Fire Lotus nodded. He grabbed Qin Rushuang with one hand and Hua Yi with the other. Then he instantly retreated. Let me see who you are. Qin Feiyang looked up at the peak of the mountain and said coldly. He then teleported and dodged the attack of the golden light blade. Rumble. The golden light blade slammed into the canyon. The entire canyon collapsed and dust filled the air. Qin Feiyang stood in the middle of the dust and looked around. Whoosh! A black shadow, hidden in the dust, silently appeared behind Qin Feiyang. Its 5 fingers were like eagle claws as it went straight for Qin Feiyang's head. Sneaking around won't do much. Qin Feiyang's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he turned around and slapped. A dazzling golden light appeared in the center of his palm. Boom! The black shadow was instantly sent flying. His entire arm was lacerated and bleeding profusely. Hee hee. Big brother, you're really amazing. A little girl's laughter rang out. Following closely, 4 figures appeared around Qin Feiyang. Dust billowed in the air, making it difficult to see their faces. Jiang Haoyan, let us see what you're capable of. Another loud and clear voice exploded like a thunderclap, deafening everyone's ears. There's more than one. The gazes of Fire Lotus Trio, who had retreated far away, couldn't help but tremble. Boom! Before he could finish his words, for terrifying divine powers erupted like volcanoes in the dust and smoke. What? This divine might, perfect war god. Fire Lotus and the other two's expressions suddenly changed. Jiang Haotiandai. Another sinister laugh sounded, for waves of godly power surged out and rushed towards Qin Feiyang from all directions. Dai! The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth raised. He raised his arm and instantly sent out 4 palms. For waves of golden light appeared and flooded the sky, colliding with the 4 waves of godly power. What? How is this possible? They actually bounced back, for cries of disbelief suddenly rang out in the dust and smoke. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang suddenly screamed, and the 4 waves of golden light also dissipated. Immediately, Qin Feiyang fell from the sky and crashed onto the ground with a bang. What happened? The voices of the 4 people once again rang out, filled with shock that couldn't be dispelled. Brother Jiang, Yi scanned the area covered in dust and smoke with an anxious expression. Woo-woo! Suddenly, the wind howled in this area, and the dust and smoke quickly dissipated. Everything inside was presented to him. Qin Feiyang at this moment was lying on the ground with his back facing the sky and his face facing the ground, constantly twitching as if he was having a cramp. Looking up again, 3 men and a woman were standing in the air. At this moment, they were lowering their heads and looking at Qin Feiyang with a look of surprise. Why did he suddenly fall down without any reason? Could it be that the method he used before has some side effects? A man in black said. This person was skinny and had sunken eyes. His long hair draped over his face, and his eyes were glowing with a faint green light. His voice also revealed a gloomy feeling. At first glance, he looked like a malicious spirit. Looking at his right arm, his skin and flesh were lacerated and fresh blood flowed out. Obviously, he was the Black Shadow who had launched a sneak attack on Qin Feiyang, but was sent flying by Qin Feiyang. The little girl glanced at Qin Feiyang, then looked at the man in black and giggled. I guess your judgment is right. It can reflect our godly power. It's normal for this method to have side effects. This person was a little strange. She was clearly a perfect war god, but she looked like an 8 or 9-year-old little girl. Her height was only about 1 meter. Her words and actions were also like a child. Just as the little girl finished speaking, Qin Feiyang's body moved. He seemed to have used a lot of effort to turn over, revealing a pale face. His head was also covered in dust, and he looked very miserable. Looking at Qin Feiyang's current appearance, the little girl giggled. It seems that the side effects are quite serious. Who are you? Qin Feiyang's face was gloomy as he looked at the 4 people. Other than the little girl and the man in black, there was also a one-eyed man and a cripple. The one-eyed man wore a black eye patch on his left eye. He was more than 2 meters tall, and his body was also very burly like a small giant. His valiant aura was a little frightening. As for the cripple, he held a golden walking stick. He was about 7 meters tall and was neither fat nor thin. However, his face was pale as if he was terminally ill. A little girl, a guy like a malicious spirit, and a one-eyed man and a cripple. Why are these people so strange? Qin Rushuang frowned. It doesn't matter who we are. The little girl giggled. What's important is that you will all die. The man in black also laughed sinisterly. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, At least let us die knowing. Okay, I'll let you die knowing. The one-eyed man opened his mouth, and his voice was deafening. Listen carefully. Cough, cough. This one-eyed man is called Hong Ping. The little girl is called Chao Jiyun. The malicious spirit is called Zhu Ge. As for me, the terminally ill person, cough, cough, I'm just an unknown pawn called Qi Hong. The cripple stared at Qin Feiyang and said, while coughing, really like a sick person, Hong Ping, Chao Jiyun, Zhu Ge, Qi Hong. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Cough, cough. Looking at your expression, you seem to know us. The cripple looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, saying, "I've heard of your names. We're actually so famous." The cripple looked at the malicious spirit and the other two. The malicious spirit and the other two were also quite surprised. One-eyed dragon lowered his head and stared at Qin Feiyang. "Quite a few people know of our nicknames, but not many people know of our real names. Where did you learn of it? As you said, is this important?" Qin Feiyang slowly got up and looked at the four of them. A trace of a smile crept into his eyes, and the paleness on his face was also dissipating and soon became incomparably rosy. The one-eyed man and the other three frowned. Qin Feiyang said, "Your nicknames are the little girl, the malicious spirit, the one-eyed man, and the cripple." "You're so smart." The little girl giggled. Qin Feiyang laughed involuntarily and said, "It actually matches your image very well." "You flatter me." The malicious spirit laughed. Qin Feiyang glanced at the four of them, the mockery in his eyes undisguised, and said, "Aren't you curious why I suddenly became so relaxed?" The four of them looked at each other with a trace of suspicion on their faces. "If I didn't pretend to be injured, would you be standing here chatting with me? Would you tell me your identities? If you really think that my divine technique has any side effects, then I can only say that you're too naive." Qin Feiyang laughed and said, "Pretending to be injured?" The four of them were startled. The malicious spirit licked his lips and grinned. "The three of you, it seems that we've been played like monkeys." "Unforgivable," the one-eyed man roared. An oppressive and valiant aura rushed towards Qin Feiyang like a tide. "Big brother, are you deliberately provoking us?" The little girl giggled. "Then congratulations. You've successfully provoked us." The cripple grinned. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the aura of the four of them suddenly surged. They were all perfect war gods. Hua Yi said in shock. "For perfect war gods, Sister Fire Lotus, quickly tell your brother to run for his life." "Run for your life?" Fire Lotus's red lips under the mask slightly curled up with a hint of ridicule. "If you anger us, you'll have to pay with your life. Big brother, are you ready?" The little girl giggled and looked at Qin Feiyang. "Don't disappoint me." Qin Feiyang laughed. "Big brother is so stubborn. You're obviously scared to death, but you still have to pretend to be calm. Aren't you tired?" The little girl giggled, and a blood-red divine power suddenly surged out. At the same time, the cripple's walking stick shook, and a golden light blade swept out. Qin Feiyang looked at the cripple and said, "So the person who ambushed us before was you. Don't make it sound so bad. Cough, cough. Besides, ambushing is also one of my methods." The cripple grinned. "Today is the day of your death." One-eyed dragon roared. "Hee hee. Soon you will become a real evil spirit." The evil spirit also laughed sinisterly. The four people's divine power covered the sky and earth, and a destructive aura enveloped all directions. The void and the earth within a radius of tens of thousands of miles were collapsing and sinking. Countless fierce beasts were affected. The other examinees also fled when they heard the news. "Accept the judgment of the death god," One-Eyed Dragon roared. For divine powers, like a waterfall, poured down from the sky and blasted towards Qin Feiyang. Not good. Really not good. Hua Yi was burning with anxiety. "He can act better than us. I really want to kill him." Qin Ruishuang glanced at Hua Yi and secretly snorted. "I want to too." Fire Lotus transmitted her voice. "If we didn't go to Black Dragon Lake to investigate, we would have been deceived by this person. Think about it. How could someone who dared to rob the Black Dragon's treasure be such a coward?" At the same time, in the Ninth Heaven Palace in an ancient hall. Inside the hall, it was 100 meters high. Dozens of people sat on the chairs in order, looking at the void in the center of the hall. There were pictures. One of the pictures showed Qin Feiyang's current situation. Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai were also present. The others were all paying attention to all the pictures. In other words, they were paying attention to all the examinees. But Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai had been paying attention to the picture where Qin Feiyang was. And in the depths of their eyes, there was a trace of a sneer. Literature Museum. Chapter 1973. The canyon had been leveled to the ground. The shattered ground trembled violently under the pressure of the four divine powers. Cracks of the abyss spread in all directions like a spider web. How terrifying was it when the four perfect stage gods of war joined forces. However, Qin Feiyang was as calm as Mount Tai. He wasn't nervous at all. Just as the four divine powers fell, Qin Feiyang slowly raised his arm and gently patted the air. Whoosh! A golden divine light appeared and attacked the divine powers of the four. With a loud bang, the divine powers of the four couldn't resist at all. The divine powers turned in the air and engulfed the four of them. Ah! Painful screams resounded through the sky. When the four of them escaped from the divine powers, their bodies were already covered in blood. How is this possible? He can still repel our attacks when we join forces. The four of them looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. Their arrogance from before had completely disappeared. After being so arrogant for so long, I thought you were very powerful. It turns out that this is all you've got, Qin Feiyang said disappointedly. The four of them were furious. Divine powers surged, and the aura of divine arts appeared. Even if you have an incredible divine art, it's useless against me. Qin Feiyang's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He jumped into the air and charged at the four of them. You've got guts. Let me fight you. The one-eyed dragon took a step forward and waved his large fan-like hand, slapping towards Qin Feiyang. We shouldn't continue fighting, because this kind of battle is disadvantageous to Qin Dage. Fire Lotus said to herself with a worried face. I agree. Fire Lotus nodded. The four of them were stronger than Qin Feiyang. If they really fought, it was inevitable that they would be injured. Once they were injured, they would definitely bleed. This way, the purple-gold dragon blood would be exposed. They also knew that Qin Feiyang didn't want to expose the six word divine art too early. However, Qin Feiyang didn't seem to have any other means other than the six word divine art to be unharmed against the four of them. Therefore, it was reasonable to avoid the battle. Boom! The one-eyed dragon's strength was terrifying. Even with Qin Feiyang's physical body, he felt a fatal threat. But he did not retreat. Because Fire Lotus and Qin Rushwang's worries were also his worries, this battle had to be ended quickly. The one-eyed man's fist was about to land on his face. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang disappeared without a trace. Concealment technique. Immediately after, the one-eyed man screamed as a bloody hole appeared on his lower abdomen. Blood was gushing out like a fountain. What happened? Cripple and the other two scanned the void in bewilderment. In the next instant, the malicious ghost let out a miserable howl as a bloody hole appeared in its lower abdomen. What the hell is going on? Could it be a spatial divine object? Jian Haotian, this is against the rules. Cripple shouted in anger. No, it can't be a spatial divine item, because if it's a spatial divine object, it's impossible for him to be so fast. I think he must have mastered some kind of divine art that can make him invisible. The little girl said in a low voice. As soon as she finished speaking, she felt an unprecedented sense of danger behind her. Without thinking, she turned her head and waved her small fist as she punched the void. The divine aura of a perfect stage war god spread in all directions. Under the pressure of the divine aura, the concealment technique immediately dissipated. Qin Feiyang appeared in the void. It's indeed a divine art that can make him invisible. The one-eyed man and the malicious ghost's pupils contracted, but then their eyes were filled with greed. A divine art that can make him invisible was simply the best way to assassinate. Cripple, little girl, you must kill him and get that divine art. The one-eyed man shouted as he took out 2 spirit sea pills. He swallowed one and threw the other to the malicious ghost. Of course. Cripple grinned and said. With a teleport, he landed in front of Qin Feiyong and swept the crutch in his hand. Qin Feiyong did not dare to take it head-on, because the crutch was a divine art. But because it had not recovered, he could not determine the grade of the crutch. If it was a high-grade divine art or a perfect divine art, he would definitely be injured if he took it head-on. These people are going to be serious. Fire Lotus was worried. If Qin Feiyong attacked without holding back, for perfect stage war gods would be as easy as slaughtering chickens and lambs. But now, Qin Feiyong had too many concerns. He did not even use 1/10 of his strength. Just as Cripple attacked, a blood-red sharp blade appeared in front of the little girl. With a monstrous sharpness, it charged towards Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong's pupils contracted. The blood-red sharp blade was a few hundred feet long. It was as if it was condensed from blood and had a murderous aura. He could tell at a glance that it was evolved from a perfect divine art. This group of people was indeed not simple. We will return the words you said just now. Even if you have a divine art that defies the natural order, it is useless in front of us. Cripple laughed. The golden crutch in the air made a deafening sound of wind and thunder. Qin Feiyong retreated while glancing at the two. Suddenly, murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Using the walk formula and teleporting, he disappeared from the sight of Cripple and Fire Lotus. This, not only Cripple and Fire Lotus, but even Cyclops and Fire Lotus were stunned. How did he disappear again? Wait. Cyclops suddenly opened his eyes wide in anger. He looked behind Cripple and shouted, "Cripple, be careful!" Cripple was stunned. But before he could react, a finger poked the back of his head. Immediately after, an aura of death emerged from the depths of Cripple's heart. The price to pay for angering me is not small. Following the cold voice, Cripple could only feel a terrifying, murderous aura bursting out from it. Then, his head suddenly exploded in the air like a watermelon. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. This scene left the one-eyed man and the malicious spirit dumbfounded. The girl also froze in the air, her little face full of disbelief. In an instant, he actually killed Cripple? Amazing! Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyong with eyes full of admiration. However, Qin Feiyong did not show off or feel proud. After killing Cripple, he grabbed the crutch and took another step forward, avoiding the blood-red blade. He landed behind the girl and then swung the crutch towards the girl's head. "Run!" Cyclops roared. The girl quivered. She did not even have the courage to turn around and look at Qin Feiyong. She directly dived and rushed out. She reacted in time and narrowly avoided the attack of the crutch. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and looked at the girl's back. He shook his head and said, "What a pity." The girl stabilized her body and turned around to look at Qin Feiyong. There was nothing else in her eyes, only fear. Until now, she still did not understand how Cripple died. And his speed was even faster than them, a perfect war god. What kind of skill was this? Qin Feiyong glanced at the three of them and said with a smile, "Although it's a pity, it doesn't matter because you will die sooner or later." The girl, Cyclops, and Ligue could not help but turn pale. Swoosh! Qin Feiyong waved the crutch in his hand and smiled as he walked towards the girl step by step. "Cyclops, so you are here. It took me a long time to find you." But at this moment, an angry shout was heard. Qin Feiyong was taken aback. He turned around and saw a white-clothed young man with a murderous aura breaking through the air. He was holding a golden longbow in his hand. His aura was also that of a perfect war god. "Give me your life," the white-robed young man roared. He grabbed the bow with his left hand and pulled the bowstring with his right hand. Divine power gushed out and formed a golden arrow. Whoosh! As the white-robed young man loosened his grip, the golden arrow shattered the void and flew towards the girl at a terrifying speed. Damn it! Seeing this, the girl's expression changed drastically. She quickly dove down and flew towards Cyclops and Ligue. Fire Lotus and the other two were also surprised. She ran away as soon as she saw this person. Where did this person come from? However, Qin Feiyong frowned. Although the white-robed young man wanted to kill the girl, the arrow was also aimed at him because the white-robed young man was behind him and the girl was in front of him. The arrow arrived in the blink of an eye. It was extremely sharp. Qin Feiyong glanced at the arrow and took a step forward. The arrow immediately passed through his original position. If he did not dodge, this arrow would have shattered his bones. At this moment, the girl had already arrived in front of Cyclops and Ligue. She grabbed them with each hand and flew away. "Don't run if you have the guts," the white-robed young man said angrily. "Don't be arrogant. We are not afraid of you. It's just that it's not time to fight with you yet." After the girl finished speaking, she disappeared without looking back. Damn it! They escaped again. The white-robed young man stopped in the void and looked in the direction where the three of them disappeared. His eyes were filled with anger. Seeing that the three of them were about to die in your hands, this person suddenly appeared. What a coincidence! Fire Lotus and Hui flew to Qin Feiyong's side and looked at the white-robed young man with a voice transmission. As for Qin Rushuang, she flew towards Cripple's corpse. Yes, what a coincidence! Qin Feiyong muttered and looked at the white-robed young man with flickering eyes. Below, Qin Rushuang searched Cripple's body for a while. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she took out an interspatial ring from Cripple's chest. There's an interspatial ring. This person must have a lot of soul stones. Qin Rushuang muttered and dripped blood on it to claim ownership. She then checked the contents of the interspatial ring. In the sky, the white-robed young man finally retracted his gaze and put away the golden longbow. He looked at Qin Feiyong and the others. Aren't you Jiang Haotian? At this moment, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. That's me. Qin Feiyong smiled and asked, "May I know who you are?" The white-robed young man said, "I'm Nie Yin." Nie Yin? Fire Lotus was stunned and sent a voice transmission. "Qin Dage, isn't Nie Yin in cahoots with Cripple and the others? Why does he want to kill them?" At the same time, below, Qin Rushuang also looked at Nie Yin in surprise. Qin Feiyong said to himself, "He has already revealed his identity. You still don't understand?" Fire Lotus raised her eyebrows and sent a voice transmission. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyong said to himself, "On the surface, he wants to kill Cripple and the others, but in reality, he wants to save them. So you're saying that the arrow he shot just now was actually aimed at you?" Fire Lotus sent a voice transmission. Chapter 1974. Yes, this person must have been hiding and watching from afar. Seeing that the cripple was killed and the sea of chi of one-eyed dragon and baleful ghost were destroyed, he pretended to be their enemy. So his appearance was not a coincidence at all. Qin Feiyong snickered. He's courting death. A murderous intent flashed in Fire Lotus's eyes. No rush. After seeing what I can do, he probably won't act rashly again. Let's wait and see what he's going to do next. Qin Feiyong said telepathically. Okay. Fire Lotus responded secretly, but Hui did not know about this. Qin Rushuang also took the interspatial ring and flew to Qin Feiyong's side. She looked at Qin Feiyong with a smile and said, "This cripple has a lot of soul stones." "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang asked. Yes. I took a rough look. There should be at least 50,000. Qin Rushuang smiled. 50,000. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus looked at each other and were overjoyed. What a great harvest! While talking, they were also paying attention to Nie Yun's expression. In fact, these words were deliberately said for Nie Yun to hear. They wanted to see how Nie Yun would react after hearing these words. But in the end, they were disappointed. From beginning to end, all Nie Yun showed was surprise at these soul stones. There was nothing else. Qin Rushuang said telepathically, "It seems that this person is very shrewd." Definitely. Otherwise, he wouldn't have hidden in the dark and let the cripple and the other 3 come out to kill us. Qin Feiyang snickered. Then, these soul stones. Qin Rushuang looked at Qin Feiyang, clutching the interspatial ring tightly in her hand. She looked quite nervous. Qin Feiyang thought and said telepathically, "Give them to great-grandmother and the white-eyed wolf first." Qin Rushuang frowned. "I know what you're thinking. However, even if I give you all these soul stones now, do you have the time to refine them? So it's better to give it to great-grandmother and the others. Even though the examination only lasts for 2 days, 2 days outside is equivalent to 2 years in the ancient castle. They might have already made a breakthrough before the end of the assessment. What's more, there's still Nie Yun and One-Eyed Dragon. I think they must have a lot of soul stones on them," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "All right." Qin Rushuang responded and handed the interspatial ring to Qin Feiyang. "What?" he hurriedly said. "Brother Jiang, is there no share for me?" "You're really thick-skinned. You want soul stones without doing anything? Scram as far as you can." Qin Rushuang laughed angrily. Hearing this, Hua Yi's expression was rather awkward. Qin Feiyang smiled. He raised his head to look at Nie Yun and asked, "You said earlier that your name is Nie Yun?" "Yes." Nie Yun nodded. "I seem to have heard that the city lord of Star River City also has a son called Nie Yun. You're not him, are you?" Qin Feiyang said in surprise. "Yes." Nie Yun nodded. Fire Lotus said disdainfully, "He's a standard playboy. Brother, we'd better keep our distance from him." "Playboy?" Nie Yun was stunned. Qin Feiyang scolded, "Fire Lotus, don't be rude." "Oh." Fire Lotus nodded, feeling wronged. Qin Feiyang looked at Nie Yun and said apologetically, "Brother Nie, my little sister has been a little naughty since she was young. Please forgive her." "Brother Jiang, you're too serious. Actually, it's not your sister's fault. Because people like me can't get rid of the reputation of being a playboy." Nie Yun said helplessly, "You can't say that. Some rich people can still do it. For example, Brother Nie." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Me?" Nie Yun was stunned and asked suspiciously, "What do you mean?" "If Brother Nie is really a playboy, then I don't think you'll participate in the 9 Heavens Palaces test. And now, in front of small characters like us, you won't be so humble." Qin Feiyang said. Nie Yun was lost in thought for a while and suddenly laughed. "Since I was born, this is the first time I've heard someone praise me like this." But Brother Jiang's last sentence, this Nie doesn't dare to agree. "Last sentence?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Nie Yun smiled. "Brother Jiang just said that you're all small characters. But do small characters dare to offend Feng Zijuan?" Qin Feiyang shook his head with a bitter smile and sighed. "We're like newborn calves who aren't afraid of tigers. Now we're regretting it." This one doesn't see any trace of regret on your faces. Moreover, this one has seen Brother Jiang's courage with my own eyes." Nie Yun said, "You've seen it with your own eyes?" Qin Feiyang and the other 3 looked at each other and looked at Nie Yun suspiciously. A few days ago, when Brother Jiang bid for the 9th grade elixir fire at the Treasure Pavilion's auction house, this one was also there. When Brother Jiang bid, the whole place was dead silent. In the end, Brother Jiang got the elixir fire at a super low price of 1,500,000. This kind of thing is unheard of before. Nie Yun smiled. It's just pure luck. Qin Feiyang shook his head, blushing with shame. Nie Yun shook his head non-committally. Then he looked around and sighed. Brother Jiang, you see, the Heavenly Dragon Mountain Range is full of danger. Why don't we travel together so that we can look after each other? Travel together? Fire Lotus and Qin Rushwang could not help but frown. Sure. Qin Feiyang, on the other hand, only pondered for a moment and nodded happily. Fire Lotus said unhappily, Brother, how can you agree to a stranger's request so casually? Nie Yun was also a little surprised. He had thought that this person would refuse, but he did not expect him to agree so easily. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at Fire Lotus, saying, Girl, you've seen how dangerous this Sky Dragon Mountain Range is now. To be honest, I really don't have the strength to protect you all alone. Fire Lotus said unhappily, but you can't just drag a random person along. How can this be called casual? Look at Brother Nie. Does he look like a sinister villain? No. On the contrary, Brother Nie is friendly and powerful. It's our honor that he took the initiative to travel with us. Of course, this is also fate. Brother Nie, don't you think so? Qin Feiyang chuckled. Yes, yes, yes. Nie Yun nodded repeatedly, feeling a little embarrassed by Qin Feiyang's praise. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Since we're traveling together, I hope Brother Nie will take care of us in the next 2 days. Nie Yun hurriedly waved his hand and said, You can't say that. We're taking care of each other. Yes, yes, yes. Taking care of each other. Qin Feiyang laughed and said, Then let's continue on our way. While traveling, not only do we have to pay attention to our surroundings, but we also have to be careful of the underground, because there are terrifying beasts lurking everywhere in the underground of the Sky Dragon Mountain Range. Nie Yun reminded. Qin Feiyang nodded, turned his head and glanced at Fire Lotus and said, Girl, did you see that? Brother Nie reminded us the moment he came, and you still doubt his character? Fire Lotus pursed her lips, and after being repeatedly flattered by Qin Feiyang, Nie Yun couldn't help blushing. But in his heart he was laughing. To gain trust so quickly, it seemed that this person wasn't much, just that his methods were a little tyrannical. Qin Dage, what are you doing? Keeping him by your side is simply a ticking time bomb. Fire Lotus transmitted her voice. Is there no danger if we chase him away? I'm afraid the danger is greater. After all, it's easy to dodge an open spear, but difficult to guard against a hidden arrow. Besides, right now we really need a helper. You and Qin Rushwang are basically idlers in this assessment, because your cultivation is too weak. Even if you expose your undead energy, it won't have any fundamental effect. And Hua Yi clearly doesn't want to take action. As for me, I don't want to expose too much of my strength. Therefore, Nie Yun's arrival is actually a good thing for us. After all, he has the cultivation of a perfect war god. As long as he doesn't encounter monarch-level beasts, he can deal with them all by himself. Qin Feiyang secretly said. Fire Lotus suddenly said, So you want to beat him at his own game? That's right. This person is following us because he wants to plot against us behind our backs. Then why don't we take advantage of this and make him our helper? Qin Feiyang secretly laughed. Even so, I still think it's inappropriate. After all, his strength is too strong. You and that mysterious Hua, you don't need to worry about it. But Sister Rushwang and I, if he suddenly attacks us, we won't be able to defend ourselves. Fire Lotus transmitted her voice. It's okay. I will keep an eye on him. If he really dares to attack you, I guarantee that he will become a corpse before he can do anything. Qin Feiyang secretly said. Hearing this, Fire Lotus's anxious heart finally calmed down. Nie Yun suddenly asked, Brother Jiang, Why did Cripple and the others want to kill you? Maybe because we are weak and easy to bully. What about you? Why did you chase after them? Qin Feiyang said. These guys are very despicable. The last time they entered Star River City, they cheated me of a large amount of divine gems. So I have always wanted to kill them. But these guys are very cunning. I let them escape every time. Just now, it was a good opportunity, but unfortunately I let them escape again. Nya Yun shook his head and sighed. Qin Feiyang smiled. Brother Nya, don't be anxious. They can escape, but they can't escape. Sooner or later, you will meet them. Yes. Nya Yun nodded. Wait. Fire Lotus suddenly braked, stopping in her tracks. There was a trace of surprise in her eyes. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang and the others looked at her suspiciously. Nothing. Fire Lotus shook her head and continued walking. Qin Feiyang and the others were baffled. Fire Lotus pondered for a moment, then asked through voice transmission, Qin Dage, is there one more person who hasn't shown up? Who? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Didn't Gao Xiaolong remind us to be especially careful of Nieyin, Hong Ping, Zhu Ge, Qi Hong, Zhang Yunfei, and Chao Jian last night? Now that Nieyin and the others have met, what about Zhang Yunfei? Fire Lotus thought to herself. So it was him. Don't worry, he will show up sooner or later. He might even be hiding somewhere, watching us right now. Qin Feiyang said through voice transmission. Fire Lotus inadvertently scanned the surrounding forest, a trace of worry in her eyes. Chapter 1975. Actually, compared to Zhang Yunfei, I'm more concerned about whether the big shots of Jiutian Palace are really watching at this moment. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Fire Lotus and Qin Rushuang looked at each other, their eyes flickering as they looked at the sky. Jiutian Palace. Inside the palace, there was dead silence at this moment. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang on the screen, their faces full of shock. However, Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai's eyes were a little hazy. 4 perfect stage war gods couldn't even defeat a beginner stage war god. One of them was even killed instantly. Everyone, if it were you, would you be able to do it? A black-haired old man said with a hoarse voice. Everyone shook their heads. I can't do it either. But this kid did it. But how did he do it? The black-haired old man frowned. Could it be that there's a secret hidden in his finger? Someone spoke. I can't see it. At that time, he teleported behind the cripple, and it looked like an ordinary finger. Someone said. As soon as this was said, someone immediately refuted. An ordinary finger can crush the cripple's head? Even his soul was annihilated? Then why don't you tell me what secrets are hidden in his fingers? I don't know. Actually, I noticed that there was a murderous aura on his fingertip. But this murderous aura disappeared in the blink of an eye. I couldn't determine its origin. Murderous aura? Everyone fell into deep thought. Mysterious murderous aura, speed surpassing war gods, and the method to reflect divine power. This kid is definitely not a simple character. Among you, does anyone know him? The black-haired old man glanced at everyone and asked. Everyone shook their heads. Great Elder. Feng Yuan suddenly stood up. Everyone looked at Feng Yuan. Feng Yuan said, Everyone, Great Elder, I know this kid. You know him? Could he be a relative of yours? The black-haired old man was suspicious. Relative? Feng Yuan's face twitched. He shook his head and said, Great Elder, this kid is not a relative of mine. I only know his name. As for his background, I sent people to investigate, but found nothing. So mysterious? Everyone looked at each other. What's his name? Asked the black-haired old man. Jiang Haotian. According to my investigation, he entered Heavenly Dragon City a few days ago. Feng Yuan said. Then how do you know him? Someone asked doubtfully. This kid is an extremely arrogant person. A few days ago, he humiliated my grandson in front of everyone in the treasure pavilion, causing me to lose all face. However, this doesn't matter. After all, my grandson's skills are inferior. But what's even more excessive is that he actually slandered our Nine Heavens Palace in the dark. They say that our Nine Heavens Palace is a bully, a scourge of the northern region. Therefore, I would like to implore Grand Elder to severely punish this child as a warning to others. Feng Yuan bowed. Did he really slander you like that? Everyone was seething with anger. Absolutely. Feng Yuan nodded. Great Elder, this matter is indeed very serious. That's right. We should immediately disqualify him from the examination and cut off his head in front of everyone as an example to others. The group was furious as they looked at the black-haired old man. The black-haired old man looked at the image of Qin Feiyong, his eyes flickering. Feng Wenhai glanced at the black-haired old man and transmitted his voice. Lord Father, how come I didn't know that Jiang Haoqian had slandered our Nine Heavens Palace? Idiot. This is obviously something I made up. Feng Yuan said. Made up? Feng Wenhai was shocked and transmitted his voice. Lord Father, you're lying to everyone. These people are either in seclusion or in seclusion. They don't know anything about the outside world. Even if I lied to them, they wouldn't know. Feng Yuan sneered. Although that's the case, these people aren't stupid. Especially Grand Elder, he's smart and cautious. He'll definitely send people to investigate. When he finds out that there's no such thing, Lord Father, how are you going to explain it to him? Feng Wenhai said. So, I need you to make arrangements for this matter. Feng Yuan transmitted his voice. How? Feng Wenhai was suspicious. Let someone pretend to be Jiang Haoqian's accomplice and go to the major restaurants to spread these rumors. This way, Jiang Haoqian won't be able to defend himself. Feng Yuan secretly sneered. Hearing this, Feng Wenhai secretly gave a thumbs up and said, Lord Father is wise. Ha! Daring to offend me. Feng Yuan is courting death. Feng Yuan secretly laughed. Feng Wenhai's eyes also had a trace of a smile, then found an excuse and left the hall. We can't wrong a good person, but we can't let a bad person go. This matter still needs to be investigated. After the investigation, we'll make a decision. Not long after Feng Wenhai left, the black-haired old man who had been silent finally spoke. Feng Yuan's eyes flashed and returned to his seat, not saying anything again. At the same time, in a small valley, One-Eyed Dragon, Li Gu'e, and the little girl all sat on the ground, cold sweat all over their bodies, their faces full of fear. I really didn't expect this Jiang Haoqian to be so powerful. Suddenly, a low voice sounded above the valley. The three of them were stunned and looked up, only to see a purple-clothed youth standing in the void above, holding a folding fan in his hand, looking quite elegant. Zhang Yunfei, why are you here? The little girl raised her eyebrows. Zhang Yunfei landed in front of the three of them and said, I followed you all the way here. What about Big Brother Nya? Li Gui asked. Zhang Yunfei said he's with Jiang Haoqian. What? Isn't he courting death? The little girl and the other two's faces changed. Don't worry, Big Brother Nya isn't that easy to deal with. Zhang Yunfei opened his folding fan and slowly fanned it, smiling. That's true. The three of them nodded. The little girl let out a long sigh and said, I thought this mission would be very simple, but I didn't expect it to be so difficult. Li Gui said sinisterly, It's all sure. Zhang Yunfei's expression changed, and hurriedly made a gesture to Li Gui to keep quiet. What? Li Gui frowned. Have you forgotten what Guillaume said? During the test, the big shots of Nine Heaven Palace will be secretly watching us. If you say it now, won't it be the same as exposing that we were ordered by Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai? Zhang Yunfei said. Hearing this, Li Gui looked at the sky in horror and said, I really forgot about this, but I'm not wrong. It's all Guiyong, Feng Yuan, and Feng Wenhai's fault. Indeed, they should have told us Jiang Haoyan's true strength. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been so careless. Even a cripple won't die, the one-eyed man thought. The most important thing is that the soul stones they gave were far less than Jiang Haoyan's value. With Jiang Haoyan's strength, he should have given us at least 100,000 soul stones each. But they only gave us 50,000. The little girl said angrily, Maybe Feng Yuan and the others don't know Jiang Haoyan's true strength. However, since we've already accepted this mission, we have to continue. Otherwise, not to mention Jiang Haoyan, even Feng Yuan won't let us go. You all know the forces in Feng Yuan's hands. If we're targeted by him, even Niayin, the son of the Star River City Lord, won't be able to escape. Zhang Yunfei said secretly, We know this, but this Jiang Haoyan's methods are so terrifying. How should we deal with him? Li Gui asked secretly, Don't worry, Big Brother Nya has his own way. Let's just follow them and see what happens. Zhang Yunfei smiled secretly. We can only rely on Big Brother Nya now. Let's go. If we delay any longer, we won't be able to catch up with them. The little girl sighed secretly. Roar! Boom! At this time, the Sky Dragon mountain range was filled with killing intent. Battles could be seen everywhere. Qin Feiyang and the others were unimpeded, because of Niayun. After all, they were still at the edge, and it was difficult to encounter a Lord God-level beast. Therefore, with Niayun's strength, he could kill any beast in an instant. In Niayun's opinion, the more effort he put in, the more Qin Feiyang and the others would trust him. Only then could he find a chance to kill with one strike. On the surface, Qin Feiyang treated him wholeheartedly, but he never let him get close to Fire Lotus and Qin Rushuang. Qin Rushuang glanced at Niayun and said secretly, Feiyang, when you killed the cripple, did you use the kill symbol art? Yes, Qin Feiyang replied. As expected. Like I said, how could you possibly be able to shatter his head with merely the power of a finger? Qin Rushuang smiled. I couldn't do anything. It's impossible to kill a perfect realm god of war with other divine arts. However, I did it secretly. Even if the big shots of the Ninth Heaven Palace were watching, they probably wouldn't have noticed. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. If they were really watching us, even if they didn't notice the kill symbol art, it would have attracted their attention. After all, a beginner realm god of war killing a perfect realm god of war in an instant is an unbelievable thing. From now on, we have to be more cautious, Qin Rushuang reminded. I know. All right. Before Cripple and the others ambushed us, you said something. You said you were very concerned about something. What is it? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. Qin Rushuang became silent. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang was even more confused. Sigh. Qin Rushuang sighed secretly and transmitted her voice. I'm concerned about the power of the bloodline. The power of the bloodline? Qin Feiyang was stunned. That's right. You, a descendant of several generations, have already undergone atavism. However, I, his biological daughter, have not shown any signs of atavism. I can't help but wonder if I'm really his flesh and blood. Qin Rushuang said helplessly. So it's about this. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood and secretly said proudly, This kind of thing depends on talent and opportunity. It can't be forced. Don't be so smug. Qin Rushuang glared at Qin Feiyang angrily. Qin Feiyang smiled. Actually, this kind of thing really can't be forced. For example, his great-grandfather Emperor Hong, as the biological son of the ancestor, didn't his bloodline power also not undergo atavism? So, it's better to let nature take its course. Otherwise, it will only add to his troubles if he continues to be entangled. M. Chapter 1976. Time flew by. Night gradually fell. Sky Dragon Mountain Range was actually more dangerous at night, because there were many poisonous insects such as poisonous snakes, scorpions, and spiders that appeared at night. If one wasn't careful, one would fall into their hands. Even detoxification pills couldn't detoxify many poisonous insects. So at night, Qin Feiyang and the others were even more careful. A whole day passed, and they were about to enter the depths of Sky Dragon Mountain Range. The beasts they encountered were far from comparable to those at the periphery. Occasionally, they would encounter a half-step divine lord. Without exception, whenever they encountered such a beast, the group would choose to take a detour. During this period, Nie Yin also wanted to attack Qin Feiyang and the others from behind several times, but it was easily resolved by Qin Feiyang. Moreover, every time Qin Feiyang resolved a crisis, it was as if it was an accident, as if it was just a coincidence. After failing again and again, although Nie Yin was a little annoyed, he didn't take it to heart, because, in his opinion, it was a coincidence. Boom! Midnight. The 5 of them finally entered the depths. According to the current situation, we must be the first to arrive at 9 Heaven Palace. Nie Yun smiled. It's all thanks to Brother Nie. Otherwise, we would still be wandering around the periphery. Qin Feiyang said, No. With Brother Zhang's strength, even without me, he would have already entered the depths. Nie Yun quickly waved his hand, looking very humble. Hua, he suddenly said, Listen, is there a battle sound in front? Battle? Qin Feiyang and the others were taken aback. They calmed down and listened carefully. Gradually, a trace of surprise crawled on their faces as they looked at the depths of the mountain in front of them. Over there was indeed a battle sound, but because of the distance, they could only vaguely hear it. Is it a human fight, or is it a fierce battle between beasts? Nie Yun frowned. Is there a difference? Fire Lotus was suspicious. Of course there is a difference. If it's a fierce battle between beasts, then it's nothing. But if it's a human fight, it means that someone is walking in front of us. Nie Yun said, Walking in front of us? Impossible. Along the way, we haven't been delayed at all. Who can run ahead of us? Fire Lotus said. Hua, he shook his head and smiled. Little sister Fire Lotus, there is always someone better than you. We cannot be too careless. Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Rushuang added, Ignore the battle over there. Let's continue on our way. Compared to first place, nothing else mattered. Yes. Nie Yun nodded and continued to lead the way. Qin Feiyang and the other 3 followed closely behind. Although the direction they were heading towards was slightly different from the direction of the battle, they were still roughly in the same direction. The closer they got, the clearer the sounds of battle became. Wait, it seems like humans and dire beasts are fighting. Nie Yun suddenly braked and stopped. He looked in the direction of the battle and said in a deep voice, It does seem like a human's aura. Qin Rushuang whispered, There really is someone walking in front of us. Who is it? Why is he so powerful? Fire Lotus frowned. Why don't we go and take a look? If it's a difficult character, we have to get rid of him as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'm afraid the first place will fall into his hands. Nie Yun suggested. That won't do. Qin Rushuang immediately said. Qin Feiyang glanced at Nie Yun and his eyes flashed. This person was really looking for opportunities at any time. On the surface, Nie Yun was fighting for the first place, but in fact he was creating opportunities, because once a battle broke out, Nie Yun would have the opportunity to plot against them behind their backs. How could they let him succeed with such petty tricks? It's better not to go. After all, this is already deep in the Sky Dragon mountain range. If it's a monarch, god-level dire beast, then we will be courting death if we go there. Qin Feiyong said calmly. Nie Yin was quite annoyed, but he nodded and smiled. Brother Zhang's consideration is reasonable. No, we should go and take a look. Hua Yi shook his head. Why? Qin Feiyong turned his head and looked at Hua Yi suspiciously. Hua Yi said, if the direction is correct, then the place of battle should be the Black Dragon Lake. Black Dragon Lake? Qin Feiyong raised his head in bewilderment. Although he and Fire Lotus had been to the Black Dragon Lake before, they had used the altar to teleport there, so they did not know the exact location. What kind of place is the Black Dragon Lake? Nie Yin looked at Hua Yi in confusion. Hua Yi smiled. This Black Dragon Lake is not simple. There is a half-step monarch, god-level, black dragon lurking in it. As he spoke, he glanced at Qin Feiyong with a meaningful look. Black dragon. Nie Yin was shocked. Let's go and take a look. Qin Feiyong suddenly waved his hand and swept up Fire Lotus and Qin Rushuang, flying in that direction. Nie Yin and Hua Yi saw this and quickly followed. Nie Yin smiled. Brother Hua, you even know a place like the Black Dragon Lake. It seems like you know the situation of the Sky Dragon mountain range very well. I've been here before. Hua Yi smiled. Been here before? Nie Yin's eyes went wide, and he said in surprise, Brother Hua, are you sure? Hua Yi nodded. I thought that you found someone to inquire about it, but I didn't expect you to come here personally. You're amazing. Nie Yin's face was full of admiration. You flatter me, Hua Yi said with a faint smile. Nie Yin turned his head to look at Qin Feiyong's back, and there was a trace of seriousness in the depths of his eyes. Originally, he thought that among this group of people, only Qin Feiyong was difficult to deal with, because Fire Lotus and the other two had not displayed their outstanding strength all day. However, he did not expect. This Hua Yi had actually come to the Sky Dragon mountain range, and he even came to the depths. It seemed that this person was not as simple as he looked on the surface. The distance was getting closer and closer. The battle fluctuations could also be clearly sensed. Dragon might. Nie Yin's gaze trembled. There was an extremely pure dragon might in this battle fluctuation. Hua Yi said, Brother Zhang, it seems that someone is fighting with the Black Dragon. However, Qin Feiyong did not seem to hear it, as he stared in the direction of the Black Dragon Lake, his gaze as gloomy as water. Qin Rushuang's face was also extremely ugly. However, Nie Yin and Hua Yi behind the two did not notice. But Fire Lotus at the side sensed something and transmitted her voice. Qin Dage, Sister Rushuang, what are you guys doing? What a familiar aura. Qin Rushuang secretly transmitted her voice, her eyes full of disgust. That's right. It's him. Qin Feiyong said in a deep voice. Who? Fire Lotus was bewildered. What kind of person could make Qin Feiyong and Qin Rushuang so resentful? Mu Tianyang. Qin Feiyong said word by word and transmitted his voice. What? It's actually him. Fire Lotus was shocked. Qin Feiyong secretly said, Now I'm finally sure that he was the one who saved Guosweki. Humph. He's still going against us. It seems that the lesson we taught him back then was not enough. Qin Rushuang snorted coldly. Clang! Just as Qin Rushuang's voice fell, a deafening metallic sound came from the direction of the Black Dragon Lake. Following it was a monstrous evil aura. This is Bloodblade's aura. Qin Rushuang's gaze trembled. Not good. He must be trying to snatch Black Dragon's divine soul. Qin Feiyong secretly shouted coldly, and without hesitation, he used the attainment formula. His speed directly soared several times, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Hua Yi and Nie Yin's sight. This, Nie Yun was dumbfounded. What? He also had a bitter smile. This person was really terrifying when he went crazy. Above the Black Dragon Lake. At this moment, a young man in purple clothes and a purple crown stood against the wind. Above his head, a blood-red dagger was suspended. If it was not Mu Tianyang and Bloodblade, who else could it be? Opposite, Black Dragon looked at Bloodblade, his huge body trembling, and his huge eyes were filled with fear. On the other side, a man and a woman were standing together. It was Gwisweki and Mu Qing. Gwisweki looked at Mu Tianyang and Bloodblade and was also shocked. But Mu Qing's expression did not change at all, and there was a strange light in his eyes. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth, raised slightly, looked at Mu Tianyang and said with a smile, "He's almost here." "Is that so?" Mu Tianyang chuckled, looked at Black Dragon and said, "I've played with you for so long, it's time to send you on your way." Black Dragon turned and fled. Whoosh! But Bloodblade instantly arrived behind Black Dragon and directly cut Black Dragon's body in half. Dragon blood poured down like a waterfall, dyeing the sky red. Half-step divine lords are just ants. Mu Tianyang smiled contemptuously, put away Bloodblade, and then waved his hand, and Black Dragon's body suddenly disappeared. Mu Tianyang. It was also at this moment. A murderous roar could be heard. Mu Tianyang looked up, and a smile appeared on his face. Mu Qing also flew to Mu Tianyang's side with Gwisweki, and then looked up. Mu Qing's eyes were full of playfulness. However, Gwisweki's eyes contained a trace of hatred that could not be dissolved. Swoosh! Very soon, 3 figures landed in the void opposite Mu Tianyang. It was Qin Feiyang and the other 2. Qin Feiyang looked at the dragon blood all over the ground, and his eyes suddenly darkened. Mu Tianyang looked at Qin Feiyang and Qin Rushuang and secretly laughed. "I didn't expect that we would meet in such a way." Telepathic message? Qin Feiyang and Qin Rushuang were stunned. It seemed that Mu Tianyang also knew that the big shots of Nine Heavens Palace were secretly watching at this time. "Where's Black Dragon?" Qin Feiyang secretly asked. "I've already killed him." Mu Tianyang secretly laughed. "You!" Qin Feiyang's eyes were full of anger. "I just stole your prey. Yet you killed my younger brother and the woman I loved the most. So the person who should be angry is me." Mu Tianyang secretly said, "I'm very sorry about Shenmei's death, but Heavenly Lord Mu deserves to die." "Not only does Heavenly Lord Mu deserve to die, but you also deserve to die," Qin Feiyang said. "Yes, I do deserve to die, but the heavens don't accept me." Mu Tianyang laughed. "Mu Tianyang, aren't you ashamed to say this? If it weren't for Qin Yuan's help, would you have survived?" Qin Rushuang was secretly angry. "Yes, I'm very grateful to Qin Yuan. It's also because of this that I didn't disclose your identities," Mu Tianyang secretly said. Chapter 1977. Do you think I'm an idiot? "You, Mu Tianyang, are a grateful person?" Qin Feiyang sneered. "Haha, you, Qin Feiyang, know me best. That's right. I didn't reveal your identity. It has nothing to do with Qin Yuan saving me, because I want you to reveal your identity yourself. It's more interesting to do this than me revealing it," Mu Tianyang thought. "You want me to reveal my identity? Don't say that I'm looking down on you. Can you do it?" Qin Feiyang sneered. "We'll see if I can do it or not." Mu Tianyang smiled playfully, then turned around and left. "Wait." Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. "You want to kill me? Then you have to think about it carefully. Because if you don't use all your means, it's impossible to kill me." Mu Tianyang stopped in his tracks, but he didn't turn around. You're not worth killing. I want to know where the demon ancestor, Mo Long, and Dong Zhenyang are now. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Them? I don't know either. Mu Tianyang shook his head. Qin Feiyang was stunned and said suspiciously, You entered the ancient world together. How can you not know? I'm also very puzzled about this. Mu Tianyang lowered his head, his eyes full of suspicion. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. At that time, not long after we entered the ancient world, a mysterious force suddenly appeared. The few of us fainted on the spot. When Mu Qing and I woke up, we found that we were already near Sky Dragon City, but there was no trace of the demon ancestor, Dong Zhenyang and Mo Long. I've been looking for them for the past half a year, but there was no news at all. It's like they disappeared from the world. Mu Tianyang turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said secretly, Mysterious power. Qin Feiyang frowned. Mu Tianyang pondered and said, I'm guessing that someone is trying to separate us on purpose. Are you talking about Ice Dragon or Small Beast? Qin Feiyang said. Other than them, I don't think I can find anyone else. Mu Tianyang said. What are these two bastards trying to do? Qin Feiyang frowned. What are you trying to do? In my opinion, in their eyes, we are just a few toys for them to play with. Mu Tianyang snorted coldly. Let's not talk about this for now. Do you know how the inner demons died? Qin Feiyang thought. What? The inner demons are dead. Mu Tianyang was shocked. Yes, not only did the inner demons die, but my cousin also died on the 3rd level. Qin Feiyang nodded. I don't know about that. That's because when we entered the divine site, the fire python sent us to the ancient world. But Mu Tianyang finished speaking and frowned again. But what? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. That's not right. Back then, Dong Zhenyang clearly said that they wouldn't die. Can the eye of destiny be wrong? Mu Tianyang thought. The eye of destiny, Qin Feiyang muttered. Mu Tianyang said telepathically, Wait, can't you and the inner demons communicate telepathically? That's right, but I can't sense his existence. Qin Feiyang said. Then it seems like Dong Zhenyang's eye of destiny isn't very accurate. Although I'm very happy that the inner demons are dead, I still want to comfort you. My condolences. Let's have some fun in the 9th Heaven Palace in the future. After Mu Tianyang finished speaking, he turned around and left with a face full of schadenfreude. Let's go too. Mu Qing looked at Gwasweki and said. Then she left without looking back. Gwasweki looked at Qin Feiyang and said telepathically, Let me ask you. Were you the one who saved Gao Xiaowei and helped Gao Xiaolong destroy my Gua family? Qin Feiyang said, Didn't Mu Tianyang and the others tell you? Gwasweki said angrily, I want you to answer me personally. It was me. Qin Feiyang nodded. If you don't want to marry me, you can say it directly. I won't stop you. I can even destroy the marriage contract in front of you. But why are you so ruthless? Gwasweki's eyes trembled and tears flowed down her face. Qin Feiyang was about to say something. There's no need to say anything. I'll make you and Gao Xiaolong pay for this blood debt sooner or later. Gwasweki smiled coldly and turned to chase after Mu Tianyang and Huiyu. Only tell her that you helped Gao Xiaolong destroy the Gua family, but don't tell her that the marriage contract was forged by Gua Zixiong. This Mu Tianyang is really despicable. Fire Lotus said with disgust. This is his usual style. He used Gwasweki's hatred for me to make Gwasweki a sharp blade in his hand. Humph, I want to see what tricks he can play. Qin Feiyang snorted. Whoosh! At this moment, Nie Yun and Hua Yi finally arrived. Looking at the dragon blood below, the two exchanged a glance and then looked at Qin Feiyang. Brother Jiang, where's the black dragon? It's already been killed. Let's set off quickly, otherwise the first place will really be snatched away. Qin Feiyong said solemnly. The half-step divine monarch black dragon was actually killed by someone? Nie Yun was shocked and asked, "Who is it? So terrifying?" "I don't know." Qin Feiyong shook his head. Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyong meaningfully and cupped his fists. "Brother Nie, I'll have to trouble you to continue opening the way." "My pleasure." Nie Yun smiled. Qin Feiyong added, "Don't take another detour." "No detours?" Nie Yun was stunned. "Go straight ahead." Qin Feiyong looked in the direction Mu Tianyang and the other two disappeared, his eyes shining. Behind, 3 men and 1 woman were moving as fast as lightning. It was Zhang Yunfei and the other 3 who had been tailing behind. At this moment, they were all sweating profusely and panting like oxen. What is Brother Nie doing? Why did he suddenly run so fast? At this rate, even if we catch up with them, we will be exhausted to death. Zhang Yunfei complained. Could it be that something happened? The fierce ghost frowned. Hearing this, Zhang Yunfei, One-Eyed Dragon, and the girl's heart sank. How is that possible? Brother Nie's strength is stronger than us. And he even has a pinnacle divine artifact. Even if he encounters any danger, he will definitely be fine. The girl suddenly laughed. True. Zhang Yunfei and the other 2 nodded. The girl transmitted her voice again. It's just that those people bought by Feng Yuan are probably useless. Those people are originally trash. The fierce ghost laughed. That's right. With their speed, I'm afraid they are still wandering in the periphery. And even if they can catch up with us, they can't help much. However, although these people are useless, those beasts bought by Feng Yuan can play a big role. One-Eyed Dragon secretly sneered. Yes. With these beasts, Jiang Haoyan and his group, no matter how capable they are, they won't be able to escape death. And I think they are about to take action. The fierce ghost grinned. Haha, there are a few good young people in this year's assessment. 9 Heaven Palace. In the main hall, the black-haired old man looked at 2 of the images and laughed happily. These 2 images were of Qin Feiyang, Mu Tianyang, and the others. Yes, one has the strength to kill a perfect war god. The other has the means to kill a half-step monarch god. These 2 already have the ability to shake the earth board. I estimate that once they enter 9 Heaven Palace, there will be changes to the earth board. The rest of the people were also full of smiles. Everyone, don't be happy too early. Feng Yuan suddenly said. Someone asked, with these 2 monstrous talents, Hall Master Feng Yuan, aren't you happy? Happy. Of course I'm happy. But don't you find it strange that the purple-clothed youth's divine weapon is a bit too powerful? Feng Yuan frowned. That's true. That bloody blade didn't even awaken, and it killed Hei Long. If it awakens, won't it be even more terrifying? For an unknown person to possess such a terrifying divine item, it's truly inconceivable. Some people began to discuss softly. Hall Master Feng Yuan, you are in charge of the resource hall, so you are more familiar with divine weapons than us. Do you know the origin of that bloody blade? Someone asked. To be honest, I've never heard of it, and because it hasn't awakened, I can't determine the grade of that bloody blade. But from the way it killed Hei Long, I guess that this bloody blade has surpassed the pinnacle divine weapon level. Feng Yuan analyzed. Beyond the pinnacle divine weapon. Then it's a legendary divine weapon? The black-haired old man said. Feng Yuan nodded. It's most likely a legendary divine weapon. Then we'll have to investigate this person's identity. After all, even our 9 Heavens Palace doesn't have many legendary divine weapons. The black-haired old man said. Shua. Suddenly, a black-clothed man appeared in the hall and knelt on one knee before the black-haired old man. Greetings, First Elder. Seeing this black-clothed man appear, Feng Yuan's eyes flashed. How is it? The black-haired old man looked at the black-clothed man and asked. According to this subordinate's investigation, there are indeed several accomplices of Jiang Haotian slandering our Nine Heavens Palace in some restaurants. The black-clothed man said, Preposterous! Even if this person is a genius, we can't tolerate him. That's right. First Elder, I suggest we kill him immediately. Angry shouts rang out in the main hall. Jiang Haotian, do you see this? This is the result of going against me. Who do you think I am? You dare to offend me? I have 10,000 ways to kill you. Feng Yuan laughed inwardly. The black-haired old man raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang on the screen and frowned. First Elder, there's nothing to hesitate about. Our northern region doesn't lack talents. Please give the order, the group urged. The black-haired old man didn't say anything. He looked down at the black-clothed man and asked, Are you sure? This subordinate is sure. The black-clothed man nodded. The black-haired old man pondered for a while and said with a hoarse laugh, This matter isn't urgent. Let's wait and see. Feng Yuan was stunned. What did he mean? Wait and see? Wait and see what? What was there to see? The others also looked at the black-haired old man with a puzzled expression. The black-haired old man smiled and said indifferently, He's just an early-stage war god. There's no need to be so concerned. Let's wait until the end of the examination. All right, since the first elder had spoken, the others could only accept helplessly. Little bastard, I'll let you live for one more day. Feng Yuan looked at Qin Feiyang, and his eyes were suffused with a wisp of shocking viciousness. Chapter 1978. Time flew by. The next morning, half of the assessment time had passed. Qin Feiyang's group of 5 rushed without stopping, and they were not far from the hinterland. However, Mu Tianyang's group was still in front of them. To be exact, they had been following behind Mu Tianyang's group. Qin Rishuang frowned and sent a sound transmission. Feiyang, why don't you use the Qi Xing formula to surpass them and keep following behind them? If this continues, they will definitely be first place. Do you really want to get first place that much? Qin Feiyang laughed secretly. Nonsense. 100,000 soul stones is enough for all of us to break through to the level of War God. Who doesn't want it? Qin Rishuang said angrily. Everyone. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Yes, during this period of time we have been in seclusion in the castle and calculated carefully. From the pseudo-god to the level of War God, 1,000 soul stones are needed. But from the level of War God to the level of War God, one needs 10,000 soul stones. Qin Rishuang secretly said. 10,000. Qin Feiyang was shocked. Could it be that no one had broken through during this period of time? It turned out that it required so many soul stones. First, he swindled 10,000 soul stones from the blood python. Then he looted the Gua family's treasure vault and obtained another 3,000 to 4,000 soul stones. Finally, he killed the 2 black-clothed men sent by Guiyong and obtained another 1,000 soul stones. From Qin Feiyang's point of view, this was already a large sum. However, he didn't expect that it was just a drop in the bucket. But what was worth celebrating was that he had obtained more than 50,000 soul stones from killing Cripple. Thinking of this, Qin Feiyang glanced at Nie Yun. As the son of the Star River City Lord, he should have more soul stones than Cripple. Qin Feiyang suddenly said, Brother Nie, Brother Hua, can I ask you a question? What question? The two of them were stunned and looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang asked, How many soul stones do you need to break through from the pseudo-god to the monarch god? The two of them were stunned. What is it? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Nie Yin replied, as long as one has broken through to the semi-divinity realm, they should know something like that. To tell you the truth, in the past we've been following Master and living in seclusion in the mountains. Thus, we don't know much about these matters. Qin Feiyong smiled. Fire Lotus and Qin Rushwing nodded as well. Nie Yin said in surprise, then you guys can be considered as hidden experts. Sorry for the disrespect. To put it nicely, he's a hidden expert. To put it bluntly, he's a country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled bitterly. You can't say that. In today's world, to be able to cast everything aside and hide in the depths of the mountains, not caring about worldly affairs, how rare is that? To put it bluntly, without extraordinary perseverance and temperament, it's impossible. Nie Yun sighed. Brother Nie is right. Hua Yi nodded. Listening to the two's words, Qin Feiyong and the other two were a little embarrassed. Brother Jiang, just now you seemed to say that you've been following Master and living in seclusion in the depths of the mountains? Nie Yun suddenly said. Qin Feiyong nodded. To be able to nurture such outstanding disciples like you, he must be a great figure. Nie Yun smiled without batting an eyelid. I don't know about that. Qin Feiyong shook his head. Obviously. Nie Yun wanted to inquire about something. Nie Yun asked curiously, then may I ask Brother Jiang what's his name? Master has never mentioned his name before. Moreover, Master has always been very strict. We dare not ask too much. Qin Feiyong said. A strict master produces outstanding disciples. Nie Yun chuckled. Qin Feiyong smiled. What do you mean by that? It seems like we're the ones asking you questions. Why are you the ones asking nonstop now? Fire Lotus looked at Nie Yun and Hua Yi with dissatisfaction. Haha, Nie Yun and Hua Yi looked at each other and laughed, saying, It's our fault, our fault. Miss, don't be angry. The total number of soul stones needed to break through from the pseudo-god realm to the divine lord realm is not a small amount. The three of you, let me explain it to you like this. Even if I, the son of the city lord, went bankrupt, I still wouldn't be able to gather so many soul stones. Nie Yun looked at Qin Feiyong and the other two and said, Is it that exaggerated? Qin Feiyong was surprised. It's not exaggerated at all. You guys calculate carefully. To break through from the initial stage of the pseudo-god realm to the initial stage of the war god realm, you need 1,000 soul stones. To break through to the initial stage of the war god realm, you need 10,000 soul stones. To break through to the large success stage, you need 100,000 soul stones. To break through to the perfection stage, you need 1,000,000 soul stones. To break through to the perfection stage, you need 10 million soul stones. And to break through from the perfection stage to the half-step divine lord realm, and then to the initial stage divine lord realm, you need a total of 100 million soul stones. Tell me, who can take out such a large amount of soul stones? Nie Yun said. This, Qin Feiyong and the other two looked at each other. They actually needed more than 100 million soul stones to break through from the pseudo-god realm to the divine lord realm. Then wouldn't all of them add up to more than 1 billion soul stones? Fire Lotus didn't count, as she was an outsider after all. Other than Fire Lotus, there was the mermaid princess, Qin Feiyong, Qin Rushwang, Tantai Li, Zhao Tailai, Chui Li, Tang Hai, Willow Tree, Yuhuang, White-Eyed Wolf, Blood Kirin, Thunder Leopard, Golden Leopard, and Dan Wonkai. A total of 9 people and 5 beasts. In total, they would need to find at least one. 5 billion soul stones. 1.5 billion was simply impossible, because now even 1 million soul stones was an astronomical number in their eyes. Soul stones are limited. Even the Ninth Heaven Palace and the Treasure Pavilion can't afford such consumption. So, Cultivation mainly depends on one's own efforts. As for soul stones, I can only say that it depends on luck. It's naturally best if there is. If there isn't, we can't force it. Hui sighed. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. It seemed that using soul stones to accumulate everyone's cultivation was a bit unrealistic. Rumble. Suddenly, ear-splitting noises came from the mountains on both sides. Qin Feiyang and the others stopped and turned their heads, their eyes full of surprise. But deep in Nie Yan's eyes, there was a flash of light. Had they finally started to act? What's going on with this movement? Could it be that there are beasts coming from both sides? Hui was surprised. At this moment, the ground on both sides was shaking. It seemed that there was a beast tide coming from afar. Fire Lotus glanced at Nie Yin and said, Qin Dage, could it be that the beasts that Feng Yuan bought have moved out? It could be. Qin Feiyang secretly said. Fire Lotus's eyes sank and said worriedly, if it's true, then how should we deal with it? One must know. What Feng Yuan bought were not ordinary beasts, but monarch god-level beast emperors. These beast emperors were not only strong, but they also ruled a large number of beasts. If they were to join hands and charge over, then even Qin Feiyang would have to activate his slaughter domain to deal with them. Don't worry, I already have a plan. Qin Feiyang secretly sneered. Crack! Boom! The rumbling sound became more and more deafening. The trembling ground became more and more violent. The mountains in the distance began to collapse. Billowing dust and smoke rose into the sky and spread in all directions. Finally, one beast after another appeared in their line of sight. Some were running on the ground. Some were flying in the air. Without exception, each of them was a giant beast comparable to a mountain. The aura they emitted was also terrifying. There were even more than 100 half-step monarch god beasts. At a glance, it was a black mass covering the sky and the sun, with a monstrous, ferocious aura. What's going on? Why are there so many beasts suddenly running out? Hui was dumbfounded. Beast-tide, Nie Yan's face was also deathly pale. Roar! Humans, be our food obediently. Accompanied by a ferocious roar, more than a dozen beasts took the lead, collapsing one giant peak after another, pouncing towards Qin Feiyang's group. These dozen beasts were all half-step monarch god. Nie Yan's body trembled, and he roared, Brother Jiang, Brother Hua, quickly run! A cold light flashed across Qin Feiyang's eyes. With a flick of his sleeves, he swept up the four of them and executed the walk character art and teleportation, tearing through the air like lightning. What fast speed! However, don't think about escaping. Under the lead of those half-step monarch god beasts, the beast tides on both sides chased after Qin Feiyang's group crazily. Ahead, Mu Tianyang trio stood in the void, looking at the beast tides on both sides with a look of surprise. Why would a beast tide appear out of nowhere? Brother Mu, long time no see. Suddenly, a hearty laugh came. Mu Tianyang was taken aback. He turned his head to look and saw Qin Feiyang rushing over. Not only was he smiling, but his face was also full of enthusiasm. What do you mean? Mu Tianyang frowned. In just a few blinks of an eye, Qin Feiyang rushed in front of Mu Tianyang and immediately gave Mu Tianyang a bear hug. With tears in his eyes, he smiled and said, Good brother, we finally meet again. Good brother? Mu Tianyang was stunned. Mu Qing, Guisweki, Fire Lotus, Qin Rushuang, Nie Yin, and Hui also looked at the two with a dumbfounded expression. Wait, what are you doing? Who's your brother? Mu Tianyang came back to his senses and hurriedly pushed Qin Feiyang away, shouting with disgust in his eyes. Brother, although we haven't seen each other for a long time, you can't be so heartless and not recognize me as your brother. I remember when we were young, we even wore underwear together. If there was a candy, you had to share it with me. Qin Feiyang said. Stop. Mu Tianyang hurriedly waved his hand. Humans, let's see where you can run to. Little ones, kill them for me. Accompanied by a series of roars, the beast tide caught up with a fierce glint in their eyes. Not good. As soon as he saw the beast tide, Mu Tianyang had a premonition of uneasiness. Ancestor, we seem to have been tricked, Mu Qing said with a frown as she looked at the aggressive beast tide. Tricked? Mu Tianyang stared blankly and immediately understood. Qin Feiyang deliberately got close to him and then used him to deal with the beast tide. Bastard, you win. Run. Immediately, Mu Tianyang glared at Qin Feiyang angrily, then shouted at Mu Qing and Hui, turned around and began to flee. Brother, wait for me. Qin Feiyang smiled and quickly caught up with Mu Tianyang with Fire Lotus and the other three. Don't let any of them go. Chase. Those beasts roared ferociously. Literature Museum. Chapter 1979. Fire Lotus glanced at Mu Tianyang, and then looked at the beast whore behind them. She suddenly smiled and said, I finally understand. So you followed Mu Tianyang for this. Of course. She was transmitting her voice. What else do you think? This Mu Tianyang first saved Gwisweki, then killed the black dragon. He has to do something. Qin Feiyang secretly laughed. So many ideas. Qin Rishuang looked at Qin Feiyang with disdain, but her eyes were full of smiles. However, feeling the terrifying power behind them, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing's faces sank. Mu Qing kept transmitting his voice. Qin Feiyang, you're despicable. Despicable? As soon as I arrived at Sky Dragon City, you started to scheme against me. Who is more despicable? Qin Feiyang secretly said. Don't be complacent. I won't let you succeed. Mu Qing coldly snorted, turned to look at the beasts and said, Everyone, we have nothing to do with this Jiang Haoqian. If you want to kill him, kill him. Don't chase us. Do you think we're blind? Just now he clearly called you good brothers and hugged the human with tears streaming down his face. The beasts in the lead sneered. This is his trick. He wants to drag us down with him. Mu Qing said angrily, but what he got in return was the group of beast sneers. Don't say any more. They won't believe it at all. Even if they believe it, they won't let us go. Mu Tianyang said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang, you bastard, I'll fight with you. Mu Qing was furious. He secretly shouted and was ready to pounce on Qin Feiyang. In fact, he had long noticed that Qin Feiyang had been following them. He had also carefully considered the reason why Qin Feiyang had followed them. Originally, he had thought that Qin Feiyang was looking for an opportunity to seize the Black Dragon's divine soul. But who would have thought that he would have such a plan? You. Qin Feiyang's face was full of disdain. Stop. Mu Tianyang also frowned and shouted. Ancestor, Mu Qing said angrily in her mind. Don't you know Qin Feiyang's methods? Not to mention you. Even I don't have the confidence. Mu Tianyang secretly glared at Mu Qing and transmitted his voice. Qin Feiyang, how did you provoke these ferocious beasts? I didn't provoke them. Qin Feiyang shook his head. If you didn't provoke them, would they chase after you? Mu Tianyang said angrily. Maybe she thinks I'm handsome. Qin Feiyang touched his chin and said with a smile. To hell with it. Mu Tianyang was so angry that his nose was crooked. Qin Feiyang chuckled and looked at Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing. He said in surprise, Your cultivation has improved too quickly. Mu Tianyang was actually a perfect war god now. And Mu Qing had also stepped into the initial stage of war god. These two seemed to have only come to the ancient world half a year earlier than him, and at that time, Mu Tianyang's cultivation was only at the initial stage of war god. In half a year, he had broken through 2 small realms in a row. I'm not as merciful as you. In the past half a year, in order to increase my strength and obtain soul stones, I've slaughtered many wealthy families. Mu Tianyang secretly snorted. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and said in disgust, You really haven't changed at all. Change? Why should I change? This world has always been so cruel. If you don't kill me, I'll kill you. Mu Tianyang sneered. Qin Feiyong glanced at him, rolled his eyes, and gave Mu Tianyang a bear hug affectionately. He said gratefully, Good brother, you're really loyal. You're actually helping us delay them. Thank you. We'll leave first. His voice was especially loud. After saying that, he let go of Mu Tianyang and led Fire Lotus and the others to use the Xing formula again. In an instant, they left Mu Tianyang and the other 2 behind. Bastard, bastard. Mu Qing was so angry that she stomped her feet. Qin Feiyong's words were obviously said deliberately for the beasts behind them to hear. What? How dare you threaten to delay us? Human, you're really courting death. Those half-step divine Lord Ferocious beasts were immediately enraged and charged towards Mu Tianyang crazily. Although Mu Tianyang had a heaven-defying divine artifact in hand, his speed was not as fast as Qin Feiyong. He was chased by those ferocious beasts very soon. Mu Qing turned his head to stare at those ferocious beasts and roared angrily. I already said that we have nothing to do with them. Why are you guys so relentless? In the face of danger, you don't even acknowledge your brother. You're really useless, human. The group of ferocious beasts had looks of disdain. This temper of mine, Mu Qing gnashed his teeth and flew into a rage. It was fine if they did not believe him, but they even mocked him instead? This was intolerable. A loud and clear voice suddenly rang out from behind the beast horde. Quickly finish them off! Hearing this, the beast tide immediately bared its fangs and pounced towards the 3 of them. Mu Tianyang glanced at the back of the beast tide, killing intent surging in his eyes. Gua Sweki frowned and said, Young Master Mu, you can't make a move. Otherwise, it'll benefit Jiang Haotian. Then you tell me what I should do. Mu Tianyang said angrily, If one could enter the spatial divine object or be able to activate the legendary altar, then they could still avoid these ferocious beasts. But the test's rules did not allow it. Gua Sweki fell silent, fear towards Qin Feiyong and Mu Tianyang involuntarily welling up in her heart. Firstly, it was Mu Tianyang scheming against Qin Feiyong, and now it was Qin Feiyong scheming against Mu Tianyang again. These 2 people's means were all too terrifying. A moment of carelessness and they would fall into eternal damnation. Mu Tianyang roared, Retreat! Mu Qing and Gwasweki shuddered and immediately retreated explosively. You guys found the wrong person. I, Mu Tianyang, am not someone that you mere ants can offend. Mu Tianyang swept his gaze over those ferocious beasts pouncing over, his eyes suffused with a shocking light. Accompanied by a clanging sound, the blood blade appeared. Mu Tianyang grabbed the blood blade and charged straight into the beast tide. That ostentatious posture, that terrifying aura, was simply unstoppable. Even half-step divine Lord Ferocious Beasts could only be slaughtered in front of the blood blade. Gua Sweki looked at the blood blade in horror and muttered, Mu Qing, just what level of divine weapon is that? Don't worry about that. You just need to know that with this blood blade, no one can threaten us. Mu Qing said proudly, but just as he finished speaking, Qin Feiyong's figure involuntarily appeared in his mind. The arrogance on his face also immediately dissipated, replaced by a look of displeasure. In the distance, on top of a mountain, Qin Feiyong and his group stood side by side. Amazing, amazing! Nye Yun and Hua looked at Mu Tianyang and were also dumbfounded. They never thought that the northern region would have such a terrifying person. Hua asked, Brother Jiang, do you really know him? If I don't know him, why would I use him to deal with those ferocious beasts? Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. He's really not simple. Nya Yun shook his head. On the surface, he was paying attention to Mu Tianyang, but in fact he was glancing at Qin Feiyang's group of 4. But I'm curious, why would a beast tide suddenly appear? Qin Feiyang frowned, turned his head to look at Nye Yun, and asked, Brother Nye, do you know? Me. Nye Yun was taken aback and said, helplessly, how would I know? Moreover, it's normal for a beast tide to appear in this heavenly dragon mountain range. After all, this is the base camp of the ferocious beasts. That's true. Qin Feiyang nodded and looked at Mu Tianyang again. Nye Yun secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then glanced at Qin Feiyang's group of 4. Seeing that all 4 of them were paying attention to the battlefield, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, he took a step back and raised his hands at lightning speed. Divine power gushed out from his palms and slapped towards Qin Feiyang and Hui Yi's heads. He thought that Qin Feiyang's group of 4 were unprepared. He thought that he would definitely succeed. But he didn't see that the moment he stepped back, the corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth immediately raised. Following that, he rolled up Hui Yi, Fire Lotus, and Qin Rushuang, and disappeared from Nye Yun's sight in a flash. Nye Yun's hands missed, and his face suddenly stiffened. Surprised? A mocking voice came from behind him. Nye Yun's heart trembled, and he quickly turned around, only to see Qin Feiyang's group of 4 standing opposite him, their eyes full of ridicule. Only Hui Yi was frowning. Because he still didn't know that Nye Yun was also a pawn bribed by Feng Yuan. Nye Yun stared at Qin Feiyang and said in a deep voice, When did you find out? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, When I first saw you. Impossible. I didn't reveal any flaws at all. Nye Yun said, Didn't reveal any flaws? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, That's just what you think is infallible. Nye Yun's heart trembled. Remember when I killed Cripple and the others? At that time, One-Eyed Man and the fierce ghost sea of Qi were destroyed by me. If it was anyone else, they would definitely kill them first, but the person you killed first was the girl. Why is that? Because you shot that arrow not really to kill the girl, but to kill me. At the same time, it was also to create an opportunity for the 3 of them to escape. Am I right? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, This matter must be said that he discovered it himself. Otherwise, it would implicate Gongzi Feng. Because Gongzi Feng was not an idiot. If he said now that he knew Nye Yun's purpose, Gongzi Feng would definitely think that someone had tipped him off. And with Gongzi Feng's ability and connections, it would be easy to find out who had tipped him off. After all, not many people knew about this plan. Nye Yun was extremely shocked when he heard Qin Feiyang's words. Later, after seeing my strength, you felt that it was too dangerous to confront me directly. So you thought of a plan. You traveled with us, approached us, and slowly looked for an opportunity. And along the way, you worked hard to open the way in front so that we could completely trust you. But you didn't know that what you thought was flawless was actually full of loopholes. Because on the way, I noticed several times that you wanted to sneak attack us from behind. But every time, I was able to easily resolve it. And those seemingly inadvertent actions were also deliberately shown by me. Because you still have value, we still need you to open the way for us, so I don't want to get rid of you so early. Let's put it this way. If you hadn't made a move just now, I would still pretend that I didn't know and let you do whatever you want. Qin Feiyang smiled again. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.